I'm calling this meeting of the Sacramento City Unified School District Board of Education back to order. Item 4.0, Pledge of Allegiance. 4.1, the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Superintendent Aguilar.
Please stand. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4.2, our broadcast statement, read by Student Board Member Ang Olson.
This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T U-verse. Today's meeting will air Monday, November 11th at noon and Tuesday, November 12th at 7 o'clock p.m. and also webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. We welcome members of the audience to address the board. Please complete a speaker form located in the back of the community room and give them to our communications representative along with any handouts you may have for the board prior to the conclusion of the item's presentation. Please speak into the microphone when addressing the board and state your name for the record. Please limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will ask that you please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda. Please also turn off your cell phones or place them on silent or vibrate.
Thank you, Board Member Ang Olson. Item 4.3, our stellar student recognition. This night, we have the opportunity of recognizing Joanna Ramirez, a new Joseph Bonheim School student, and this presentation will be done by Second Vice President, Board Member Minnick.
All right, thank you. I would like Joanna to please come forward so we can recognize you. Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to be able to present this tonight, and I'm especially excited that you are a student at NJB, and I know you guys are doing awesome stuff. And so I am first going to read a little bit about you, and then give you the opportunity to speak, and then I'll come down to present you with a certificate. So Joanna Ramirez is a fifth grade student at New Joseph Bonheim School that has gone above and beyond. She has actively participated in 4-H and Nature Bowl. She loves agriculture, science, reading, and learning with reading partners. Joanna has partnered with her sister in winning a gold award at the regional 4-H competition and was in the top 3 awards for Nature Bowl. She has been a kindergarten buddy and mentor who represents New Joseph Bonheim with pride. Joanna demonstrates her leadership daily, and her principal and peers recognize her for her friendliness and her kindness. Her plan and ultimate goal is to graduate with honors at UC Davis and become a doctor who will serve our community. So let's hear it for Joanna Ramirez. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit. I'm especially curious about your 4-H awards and stuff. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing?
So I've been doing 4-H since I was in 3rd grade. And thanks to Miss Tony, we've been able to be doing competitions and to work with other schools in competitions. That way we can learn about agriculture and different plants and animals in 4-H.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Very cool. And I'm glad you have your supporters, your fans standing up here with you. I'm going to come down with this certificate, and then maybe we can get a picture.
Oh, we can go in.
Oh, wait. Gotta move that way.
Oh, they're taking it that way. I don't like Do we want to go this way? It's okay. We had a photobomb. That's what we were trying to. Thank you. Congratulations again, Joanna. We're so proud of you. Item 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session.
I have none, Madam President, but the superintendent does.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm pleased to announce that our board, by unanimous vote, approved the appointment of Ms. Kimberly Mackey as our new instructional assistant superintendent.
Congratulations, Ms. Mackey. We're so grateful to have you joining our team. Item 6.0, agenda adoption. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda? Do we have a second? Student preferential vote?
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Item 7.0, public comment. This public comment is on all non-agendized items. We have 2 minutes per speaker. Ms. Elliott, do we have public comment this evening?
Yes, we have 9 public comments.
No, I said,
Sorry, we have
Mr.
10 public
Elliott.
comments. Please line up behind the podium as your name is called. We have Janice D., Trudy Moore, Frank DeYoung, Cecile Nunley, Sarah Williams Kingsley to start.
Hi, my
Good evening.
comments are actually geared toward the unions, who I think have been extremely rude and have not come to the table under several invitations. It is my understanding, I have not been here since the last meeting, that this is continuing on, that there have been no discussions for the contract. And in my opinion, they're acting like a bunch of 2-year-olds and not coming to the table, or they can't solve any problems unless they do come to the table. I think that Mr. Aguilar has been polite in asking for and inviting them to the table to discuss what needs to be discussed, and get your together and get to the table. And the idea that each of you have to talk at one time instead of all coming together is ludicrous. We are way past the timeline and the time frame of when things need to be taken care of. And it's crunch time, people. Get your into the seats at the table and talk about it. You're not going to solve anything if you don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I think we did get her name for the record. Oh, yes.
Janice.
Ann, are you running the
Janice.
clock? Okay, thank you.
Good evening, board members and superintendent. I am a Sacramento resident, and at the urging of my neighbors, I addressed you during your board meeting on August 15th. I'm here again at their urging. We want you to know we've submitted 3 California Public Records Act requests to your staff. They were delivered in person and by email on October 3rd, October 7th, and October 14th. Prior to tonight's board meeting, I emailed copies to each of you, and I have hard copies here to give you. Ann has them. State law required your staff to respond within 10 calendar days, but they didn't, not for any of the 3 requests. It's now over 30 days later, and I'm still waiting to receive records on all 3 requests, or at least some kind of communication or legal justification for the delay as required by law. On October 30th, your policy and government manager, Mr. Nathaniel Browning, told me in writing that he was not responding to the requests because, in his mind, they were irrelevant. As you know, that is an unlawful reason to withhold records. I am concerned the school district is, by its own conduct, teaching our students that it is not important to obey the laws state laws, that transparency in government is not important, and that some people, district staff, are above the law. District staff are not and should not be above the law. They should obey the law like the rest of us. I hope you will take steps to ensure your staff comply with the law and be worthy of their positions in public service. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And can you reset the clock? Please go ahead.
Good evening, President Ryan and Superintendent Aguilar, Frank DeYoung, C.K. McClatchy, Sam Brennan, and Sutterville. I'd like to speak tonight very briefly, because I only have 2 minutes, obviously, to remind this board about their fiduciary responsibilities, not to the union, but to the people of this community. And that means parents, children, and retirees who they pay in their taxes for this school. So they have a right to expect a return on investment. We have a right. I don't know how many people have come here and asked this board to stand firm, because we're at a place right now where we are in dire straits. And there are some things that are probably going to have to be done that a few of us who have lived through this before, Superintendent Wu and and Pritchard, Board Member Pritchard, and me have seen what's coming. We know what it's going to be like. The union doesn't care. The union only cares about one thing: money and power. Don't let them kid you. They're not about the kids. They're not about the teachers. They're not about the parents. What they're about is they want their money and they want their power. Well, you're sitting there because you represent us. They don't. And any board member that chooses to go rogue, I got news for you. When this is all said and done and the parents are yelling and screaming about what's happening to their children, be sure you remember to say you were part of it, that you felt this was a good idea. And I can't say it any stronger than that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. And if you can reset the clock, thank you.
Okay. Oh, good evening. Good evening, Board President Ryan and trustees. There's a few things, and I know that there is so much that is almost hostile out there. And I thought sometimes when things are hostile, what you need to do is really focus back on what can we celebrate. And so I started thinking about what can we celebrate. And some of the things that I think back earlier this year, this entire board voted 7-0 to support Superintendent Aguilar and gave him a positive evaluation. That's something that is cause for celebration. Number two, we've seen assessments that have started this year. It's been years on some of these assessments, and we're starting to see those assessments happen now. That's great, and that's something to celebrate. And we need those because we know that with those assessments, that it supports equity and it also supports student achievement, which is one of the goals of this board. The other thing, we now have a new CBO. Thank God we need that continuity for our district. We need that continuity with our superintendent. We need that continuity with our CBO. This is a great foundation for us to keep building, but we need everyone to stick together and make sure that we continue to build. So I'm asking the board, following on with Frank, and I know he was so passionate, and it's deserved passion, because we need for all of you to work together and stay the course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Williams Kingsley. I've been before you several times now. I also wanted to come and make a couple of comments that are more positive than negative this time, which is rare, right? Hallelujah. I'm going to start with also praising the assessment plan after months and months of asking all of you to make sure that the superintendent and the staff were rolling out a robust assessment plan that put us in a position where we understood what was happening in the lower grades and that parents were given tools to assess whether their children were or were not on grade level, and that across the school district we can see how we're doing with early literacy and math. I'm thrilled to know that it's being implemented, however challenging that process might be. My own child had his teacher give him one of the core assessments, and the data was really useful, and I'm really thankful that that is now a tool that our teachers are using. I also wanted to say that our school site council, with 4 new members this year, did receive a school site training or school site council training from district staff, and it was much appreciated and gave us information that we didn't have before and changed our process, which is great. I am unfortunately concerned about 2 things. One is that district email seemed to be down for at least 5 days, and the communication about that was lacking. If you sent an email and it got returned, that might clue you in, but there was no robust communication to let our parent community know that if they had an issue, they should call their school site, and that should have been handled better. And also, the special ed department is down half of their supervisors. So we've got 2 people remaining after 2 left over the summer, and they're handling the workload of 4 people. And you can imagine the things that are falling through the cracks in that situation and the overwork that's happening for those people. We've been asking when those positions will get filled and unfortunately have gotten no progress reports.
Thank you, Ms. Kingsley.
We have 5 additional commenters. Please come to the podium. Sherilyn Dalton, Ian Arnold, Kenya Martinez, Allison French-Tubo, and Bernie Evangelista.
Good evening, board. I haven't seen you guys in a minute, but I'm back. I'm a mother from Burbank High School. My children were the ones that was jumped by 30 plus children. They're still out of school to this very day. My son just got home structure school because your staff failed to expel all the children that were involved. There was kids still in my son's first, third, and fourth period, but they didn't suspend my son, but they suspended my grandsons. Now, I got a video showing how they got jumped, and a teacher who left them unattended got jumped by 30 plus children. They didn't even care that that was a staff member of yours. And to see this picture, to see this video, it just hurts me. And that's why my son or my grandchildren will not be back in that school because they're not safe. But you got your principal telling me that he's red line. What is red line? That doesn't have no behavior term in what I was taught. Red line to me is segregation. So he needs to use his words wisely. I don't care if he sleeps with an African-American woman, but you use your words wisely when you talk about mine or any other of color. And nobody's done nothing about this yet. Only thing that's got something done about it is Caleb, my son, who has an IEP, who's now down from, they're not getting the education that they deserve. But they're getting calls on my phone every day that they're truant. How is that possible?
Thank you.
Can we ask that Nathaniel, please?
Yes, I was
give
going
her
to ask if we
information?
can get your information for constituent services. And Stephen Brown as well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Stephen Brown has been working hard.
Okay.
Good evening, President Ryan,
Good to hear.
Superintendent Aguilar, board members, Ian Arnold. So I've been up here and spoken a few times about the fact that it's absolutely abhorrent that California is 41st in per pupil spending in the United States. Kids in New York State are not worth twice what California's kids are.
Mm-hmm.
Kids in Wyoming are not worth 79% more than our kids are. Kids in Mexico are not worth 3% more than our kids are. We need to find a way to fix that. We need to work together to do it. I want to recognize that the board took a strong stand a few weeks ago in endorsing unanimously the communities and schools first. And since you have done that, what I'd like to do is have you all sign our petition endorsing that. I think most of you up there should be Sacramento County residents, and I'll wait over here while it gets passed around. Thank
And
you.
Ian, just one question. If we've already signed that, can we
You're
sign
already-
it again?
If you already signed it, don't sign it again.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Good evening.
Got it. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Kenya Martinez, and I'm coming here to talk about one issue that I felt happened. I think it was last week, the superintendent, CAO Christine Beta, and board member Borowski went to McClatchy High School to talk about the subs and had a parent meeting. And I just have to tell you that I am utterly disgusted. The fact that you would go to McClatchy High School to talk about the lack of subs at that school when there are so many students, Black and brown students, students with disabilities who are being taught by uncredentialed teachers, that you would make McClatchy High School a priority and not students with disabilities a priority. I am thoroughly upset from the bottom of my heart that you guys went to the school actually to coddle, in my opinion, coddle those parents when my students, students with disabilities, students of color, go without teachers every day, and you guys don't pay attention at all whatsoever. So that's the first thing I wanted to discuss. The second thing is the fact that you haven't had an email system for the last 5 days. We are not living in prehistoric times. I don't know who is not doing their job, but the level of incompetency, the fact that you guys don't address it, it's disgusting that we would go 5 days without emails in a urban school district with over 40,000 students. I'm dumbfounded. And usually when I come to these board meetings, I'm kind of upset, but I'm especially upset about that because, in my opinion, you screwed with our kids' safety. If something happened, we would never know about it.
Thank you, Kenya. We want to have Elliot address it. If we can please have Elliot speak to that for a few minutes, since this is an issue that has consistently come up. And I think it's important. In the time I've been on the board, we've never had a virus of this magnitude impact the district. So could you please speak to that?
Sure. So the district did and is currently experiencing a disruption to services, including email, as a result of a virus infection that we detected on Friday evening, the 1st of November. At this time, we have about 75% of email up and running. The virus did not entirely disrupt email. It was intermittent. And we do understand that we probably could have done a better job of communicating that outage, but with limited resources, we were in the process of trying to mitigate it. We do apologize for any inconvenience that might have caused.
Thank you, Elliot. And to Kenya's point, because I think it's a valid one, the board is directed that there be communication that goes out both through robocalls and other mechanisms so that between now and when this is fully functional again on Tuesday, there is that understanding in the community. Please, and we're going to reset the clock.
Hello, board and superintendent, Allison French-Tubo. I'm just here today, as usual, to beat the drum about our long-term budget concerns and my expectation that everybody involved in the district, so that's parents and community members and labor partners, everybody, that we continue to find a way forward because there's no way this problem solves itself. And I would like to ask especially that the input of the parents and community members who volunteer on all sorts of advisory committees be considered, and also that we use the resources that we have, hired a very experienced chief business officer that I want to say I think this is a positive move forward for us. So trying to keep an encouraging tone but be clear that the expectations are there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Superintendent Aguilar, board members, good evening. I'm Bernie Evangelista, the principal of the California Montessori Project, a kindergarten through 8th grade independent charter school located at the Thomas Jefferson campus. We have been there since 2006, and I am very happy to report that today we had our Fun Run fundraiser, and part of the proceeds we are going to use towards campus beautification. So I'm here to just extend an invitation to each and every one of you to come visit our campus and see the Montessori students in action. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Do we have any other public comment at this time? With no other public comments at this time, we are going on to item 8.1, employee organizational reports. I don't have a list of the SCTA topics. No, wait 1 second. We're trying to pull it up. Our first employee organizational report will be provided by SCTA this evening. On the topics of Safe Haven School District, making Sacramento City a world-class school district, vacancies, fiscal transparency, and accountability.
Hello.
And if you set the clock at 15 minutes, please.
Well, we won't need that, but thank you. Good evening. David Fisher, President of the Sacramento City Teacher Association and a parent of 2 children in the district. Want to talk about 2 or 3 items this evening. First, on Tuesday, November 12th, at the SCTA office at 4 p.m., we will be providing a training to educators regarding the rights of immigrant students and educators as it relates to the district's safe haven policy and California and federal law, of course. We're very pleased to be working with the Luis Cespedes and the Cruz Reynoso Bar Association to provide this much-needed training and hope to offer it to every certificated educator in the district between now and the end of the school year. Second, in the back we have flyers and a copy of an invitational letter from County Supervisor Phil Cerna inviting interested parents and community stakeholders to a community forum we will be co-hosting at the former Fruit Ridge Elementary School on December 12th at 6 p.m. It is our belief that if Sacramento is going to truly develop into a major league city, we need to have a major league public school system. That starts with fiscal transparency, accountability, keeping your word, and spending valuable district resources on our students, rather than giving them away for for-profit insurance companies. We have a number of ideas for advancing our district, including restorative practices and the implementation of an MTSS program, thereby ensuring that our students receive the education and services particularly tailored to their individual needs. We were also encouraged to see that Senator Kamala Harris will be introducing a bill very similar to our proposal to create opportunities for before and after school programs where parents can enroll their students in schools near their place of work in a community schools model and in partnership with state, private employers, and the district. Finally, we are very pleased that a number of organizations have agreed to co-sponsor our forum, including SEIU, Local 1021, the Sacramento Central Labor Council, Greater Sacramento Economic Council, the Los Rios Federation of Teachers, California Teacher Association, the California Federation of Teachers, Youth Forward, and of course, Supervisor Phil Cerna. We hope to see a lot of people there on December 12th. Thank you.
And Mr. Fisher, you said you have flyers in the back of the room, December 12th?
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. Moving on to organizational reports, SEIU. Okay, great.
Hi, good evening again, Superintendent Ryan. I'm sorry, Superintendent Ryan. Somebody said it earlier and I just stuck.
We're all a little tired
Yes.
today. Don't worry
Evening,
about it.
everybody. So Ian Arnold representing the classified employees from SEIU Local 1021. Not a whole lot to report. We are glad to see that our backlog of grievances is moving now that we have a new labor relations director. Some stuff has moved through mediation. We're not necessarily satisfied with the outcomes, but we're at least glad to see the process moving because we've been sort of stuck for a while. But the big news is it is that time of the year again, and our canned food drive is underway.
Excellent.
And we want to remind everybody that every single year that we've done this, and it's all about bragging rights. Transportation won the first 3 years in a row. Maintenance and operations has won the last 2 years. And the Cerna Center with the highest paid folks in the district comes in last. You got to do better, folks.
So can I ask you, Ian, how many pounds was it last year, the winning pounds?
I don't remember how many it was that won. I think it was 680 pounds.
Okay, so we gotta up our game.
Yeah, I need you guys to throw my back out when I come to pick this stuff up. Thank you.
Thank you for your partnership.
Mr. Ian, Mr. Arnold, I just want to, if you can just be a little bit more specific. I know that in the past you have described the most needy products, things that you think our community needs the most of. Can you maybe just speak
Yeah,
on
yeah. I
that?
mean, obviously, canned goods, anything that'll last, rice, beans, things like that. We do also accept diapers. So what'll happen is we'll get a phone call and we'll hear that we have somebody who's, been hurt, no longer able to work, is not currently collecting any kind of a paycheck or is collecting very little. And then we'll find out that it's a family of 6. They've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And so we will make the appropriate adjustments to the food boxes we bring them. We attempt to bring, we attempt to bring about 2.5 weeks worth of food and paper goods. And then we also collect checks because then we run down to whoever's got the best sale. This time of year is always great to buy turkeys. After Christmas is even better to buy turkeys. And then sometimes of the year we can get sliced food, et cetera. And we always try to provide milk and eggs. So, but canned foods and dry goods that will last are really what we need. Thanks. And cash.
Thank you so much, Ian. And I just had a memory that flashed of the buses donated to Haiti the other day. Another amazing partnership with you. So thank you.
Yes, and actually I just want to say on that, we're currently looking for fire trucks because the whole village almost burned down about a year ago because there are no fire trucks. We have a fully staffed fire department, but no fire trucks there. We did have our hands on 2 fire trucks in Ventura County, but wildfire season came back and the state took them back. So
Okay.
we're not going to be asking you for help with that, but we might be asking you to say, hey, they did the right thing with the buses, so let's do the right thing with fire
Courage with the
trucks.
city. Yes, perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. TCS. Teamsters. UPE. Okay, we have none of those present this evening. Moving on to the District Parent Advisory Committees. Community Advisory Committee.
It went faster than
It's okay, don't worry about it. We're going to reset the clock. Thanks,
Okay,
Sarah.
sorry.
Thanks, Kenya.
I'm again Sarah Williams-Kingsley, and this is Kenya Martinez, and we're here to represent the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education. And as a group, we wanted to talk about a couple of things. One is we held elections at our October meeting and welcomed 2 new members at large to our committee. Lisa Arnold Fernandez and Dennis Ma, and we're happy to say that we're now a full committee. All of our positions are full. And as a group, I was asked to mention that we now have a very diverse group representing all different race and ethnicity groups, and our students represent a wide array of students with disabilities. Our families make up a bunch of different, do we have single parents? We certainly have adoptive parents and some LGBTQ members, and so we're really proud of our diversity. We are, as a group, very concerned about the staffing in the special ed department. As I mentioned in my public comment, 2 supervisors left over the summer, so we're left at half capacity. And I know we don't have exact details on how many of the other district level positions are open, but we know that there are several. So those would be like not the supervisors, but the program officers,
specialists.
right? Yeah. So so some of our school sites are not being properly staffed in terms of when they need assistance from the district. We've also heard from parents that they are being told that there are not enough contractors for various positions, speech therapists, the like, psychologists to adequately staff IEP meetings or services. So this is a big area of concern for us, and we would like to know sort of what happens next. But the staff is really challenged because they're understaffed, so getting us answers is also challenging. And was there one? That was it, right?
Our next meeting is going to be November 19th. That meeting we'll have our parent-to-parent format. I've mentioned this before. In the first hour, we do parent-to-parent.
which is in order for parents to get to know one another, connect. We are happy that our Director of College and Career Readiness will be presenting. Also, Jeanette Schroeder, our coordinator for ELA, is going to be reporting out on the new assessment, so we'll have some numbers as far as dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, so we're very excited about that. Yes, and we'll know about the status of the dyslexia pilot. So we welcome all of the board members to attend. And I'm just going to reiterate again, special education is understaffed, so we ask that you please make it a priority.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. And just, can you please repeat the date of the CAC?
It's November 19th.
Okay.
Between 6 and 8 o'clock.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And our District English Learner Advisory Committee, do we have anyone from the DLAC? No? The Local Control Accountability Plan and Parent Advisory Committee. And it looks like we have an overhead item. Is that set to go? Okay.
Coming up. Good evening, board members, Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Scott Graves. I'm here representing the LCAP Parent Advisory Committee. I'm going to give you a very brief update on our third meeting of the school year, which took place last week on the 28th. We had a really robust series of discussions among ourselves. We also had really good turnout, I'm pleased to report. Almost every member of the committee was there either in person or on the phone. So that was very encouraging. District staff presented on chronic absenteeism in the district. They provided some very sobering statistics, as I'm sure you're all aware of those stats. They also told us what the district has been doing to attempt to mitigate the situation, improve it, but also noted that there are many challenges that the district still faces in this regard. Your new CBO, or our new CBO, Rose Ramos, stopped by for a brief visit, talked about her experience, and we're very pleased that she is in that position. She has been very helpful to the committee and to others as well. What I wanted to do now was turn to a little brief discussion of how we have decided to organize ourselves internally as a committee. The first thing I wanted to do was just provide you with some, if I can show you here, hopefully these will show up.
We can see it.
Yeah, so some of the key discussion norms, because we want to make sure that when we talk about things as a group, sometimes discussions could get heated, but we want to make sure that that we're remembering each other's humanity. So some of the key norms here that we decided upon are that we need to be student-centered and trust that everyone that comes to our committee meetings comes with a desire to support students. So we come in the room understanding that. We also understand that we are going to honor and consider everyone's voice and perspective, and we're going to be open to new questions, to new ideas and questions. So this is sort of just a few of the norms that we're using to help organize our discussions over the coming months as a way of ensuring that even as times may get difficult among the 16 of us on the committee, we're always going to remember to treat each other with dignity and respect. I also finally wanted to point out that we had a very animated discussion about a key role of our committee, which is to provide one voice in board communications, including by reviewing the LCAP draft and providing feedback to you, the board, and the superintendent. Among those who have been on the committee for a while, I'm a newbie. This was only my third meeting. The question that came up was, can the timeline for input from our committee be modified to promote more timely feedback? There was concern among those who have been on the committee a bit longer that perhaps our feedback was coming a little too late in the process. So I think you're going to be hearing more about that in the months to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. And thank you to the whole LCAP Parent Advisory Committee for the hard work you've been doing, as well as our other wonderful groups, including the Community Advisory Committee. Item 8.3, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, President Ryan, and thank you to everyone for being here. I do want to just spend a few minutes and just acknowledge, and this is my own view, that I did stop by the LCAP PAC meeting and think that we have the best LCAP PAC committee, at least in this region, a very empowered and knowledgeable group of parents that come to those meetings and provide very good feedback to our team. So I want to thank everyone that was there, because indeed I think everyone was at the meeting. Because the focus is on our students, the last board meeting I did talk a little bit about my hope that our community will continue to stand, just as you've asked us to stand firm and united on certain issues, that I want to ask you to stand firm and united in holding us accountable on issues related to student achievement and student outcomes. And it just so happens that the next presentation on the agenda is related to SBAC scores of our students. And I want to just remind, just as Mr. Graves used some of the wording in his commentary, that while you're going to see a lot of data presented, a lot of numbers, that the board and I have always felt that yes, we will become a data-centric organization, but that behind n sizes and numbers and numerators and denominators, there are individual stories of individual students and families. And so as we prepare to hear from our staff, talk about a summary of our SBAC scores, that you keep in mind that those numerators and the denominators all represent the lives of individual children and their families. And we take that very, very seriously. So if you see 50%, we are thinking about every single student that is in the numerator and the denominator. I hope that everyone that is in the audience at this time will remain in the audience to listen to that entire presentation. We will always celebrate bright spots. We will always celebrate pockets of excellence, if you will, but we will always recognize and stay firm and committed to deserts of despair and areas in which we know that we have to do better, and we expect our community to hold us accountable. First and foremost, hold me accountable as your superintendent, but I think I can speak for the board that we look forward to being in that position of being held accountable by each and every one of you in the audience today. So again, I hope that you will all remain for the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Aguilar. Item 8.4, the President's Report. I won't take much time this evening. I am so happy to hear the Superintendent talk about the need to address this recognition that there are pockets of excellence throughout the district, but for the majority of students, low-income students, students of color, we know they quite often have inequitable opportunity, and that in fact your destiny can be determined by your zip code, and that this has in fact been a troubling reality of the district for several decades, a reality that goes back to my time when I was going to Sac City schools, to many of our educators' times when they attended Sac City schools, and to date, when we see our low-income students and families asking to have an equal opportunity to reach their full potential, and recognizing that based on the school they go to and the resources that those schools have, it will determine, in fact, whether or not they are able to become all that we know that they can be. One bright spot has been our elementary athletics, because as we know, while the opportunities in the classroom are critical to student success, it's everything else that makes a full student experience. It's enrichment, it's athletics, it's having access to music and arts programming, often after the school day, that really inspires our children to come to school each day. I have had the opportunity to attend some of our elementary athletic flag football games. For many of our low-income students, it's the first opportunity they have ever had to play elementary athletics, because they have not been able to afford to participate in league activities that have consistently been the norm in Sacramento, because we have not invested in our ability to grow these young individuals as athletes, as part of a team, as part of something that motivates them to stay on track academically, and behaviorally. I will also say that I'm very proud to share that today we launched a partnership with Sac Republic, with Bank of America, with USA Soccer, and the city to do the launch of the first soccer field that we have at one of our school reuse sites, which is happening at Maple Elementary School with La Familia. We were able to transform one of our old tennis courts into an incredible full-service soccer field where we will have actual practice run by Sac Republic for students who would have never had access to this program before. I am proudly wearing my Sac Republic t-shirt today, which all of our students received, is part of the opening of this field at La Familia Maple Elementary, and they have committed to rolling out at least one more practice field free of charge to Sac City Unified in each area over the course of the next few years. And so we're very proud of that, and we see that as equity in action. Item 8.5, Student Board Member Report by Student Board Member Olivia Ng Olson.
Thank you, President Ryan. On October 27th, last week, Governor Gavin Newsom declared California in a state of emergency due to the effects of unprecedented high wind events that have resulted in fires and evacuations across the state. For many students across our district, this statewide announcement brings back memories of the Paradise and Butte County fires last fall. On Friday, November 16th in 2018, SUSD finally closed after days of already hazardous air quality. The Thursday before, on November 15, the air quality index was 314, and anything above 300 is considered hazardous. I remember walking the halls of McClatchy, and the air even inside the school was gray and cloudy with smoke. The district kept school in session even when the air quality was unhealthy and borderline dangerous, announcing, "We will be keeping all activities indoors and minimizing the opening and closing of doors. We will also be limiting all physical activities for students." Meanwhile, Sac City College across the street from McClatchy had already canceled school for its students, who are adults. And the American Lung Association states that children face increased risks from air pollution because their lungs are still growing. Along with many other students, each of my classes are on opposite sides of a partially outdoor campus, which involves walking for 5 to 10 minutes to the outdoors between each period. And doors can't be closed if you need to let over 2,600 students from McClatchy High School walk in and out. Students were breathing through their shirts or using thin masks, neither of which are sufficient methods for blocking out the bad air. The New York Times wrote that the state public health department recommends P100 masks and N95 respirators, both of which are approved by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health for use by firefighters. No masks were provided for any students or faculty who were breathing the caustic air for more than 6 hours in the day. Schools should have been shut down before that Friday, and it scares me and other students that we are approaching the anniversary of this event last year, and there is no measure in place to prevent this from happening again. We need to have a set standard by which we cancel school, and if we already have one, then we need to revise it, because an AQI of 314 is extremely hazardous, and last year we were still required to go to school on that Thursday. I suggest the district establish a clear policy for what levels of air pollution trigger school closure, and how much advance notice students and parents are given regarding that school closure. The second point I'd like to bring up tonight is still along the lines of student health and school environments. It's pesticides. Some of my classmates and I were recently looking over the student district handbook and student health services and saw the list of pesticides and herbicides used on district campuses. Most alarmingly, Roundup, an herbicide that contains glyphosate, is actively used and has been thoroughly identified by both accredited national and international sources to be toxic and dangerous for people's health. In 2015, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research in Cancer found that there is a particular association between glyphosate and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. On March 28, 2017, the California Environmental Protection Agency Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment confirmed that it would add glyphosate to California's Prop 65 list of chemicals known to cause cancer. In April 2019, the U.S. Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry issued its draft of toxicological profile for glyphosate. The report confirms increased cancer risk from glyphosate exposures. And I understand that this is a complicated issue, not the fact that glyphosate and Roundup are bad, because there's clear evidence for that, but the decisions on pesticide alternatives and different methods can be tricky. We need to obtain the expertise, possibly through toxicology experts, Cal EPA, or California Department of Pesticide Regulation, to identify which products are still effective but minimize the risk to students. But in all honesty, I'd rather have an overgrown field of grass and weeds than be at a higher risk of cancer. So in the case that alternatives may be more expensive or a little less effective, we need to keep student health and well-being at the center of all decisions made, outweighing the manicured look of fields or financial savings from dangerous pesticides. And the same goes for air quality standards. The money lost from canceling school should in no way be a factor in deciding whether or not to keep students and teachers in a school where air is dangerously polluted. These are both urgent issues, as California is now in a state of emergency and Roundup is still being used on school sites. And I hope that following tonight, action will be taken on these two matters to improve school environments in the interest of safeguarding student health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Student Board Member Ang Olson. Fabulous remarks. I had actually approached the state superintendent about an air quality index policy last year, as well as the local air board. I would love to have you join me in a meeting and share your remarks to request that we do move together on a statewide policy around this. And then, as you know, we will be addressing the pesticides in an upcoming board meeting, and I'm hopeful that we will adopt a ban. Item number 8.6, information sharing by board members. Do we have any information? Board Member Morawski, followed by Board Member Vang. Followed by Board Member Pritchett.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to share with you a couple of community forums that we had in the last couple weeks and some of the outcomes from that. So at October 28th, we were at Bret Harte for a school community forum, and I have to tell you, it is a school on the move. There is so much energy around boosting academic achievement, boosting school community engagement, parent engagement, and there's a very active PTA now. So they're doing so much work, and I really wanted to congratulate them for that. We're also launching a Friends of Bret Harte PTA. So it's a way for community members to affiliate with the PTA and support financially. We also had a forum at McClatchy, and I did want to Ms. Kenya Martinez's comment earlier. Kenya? I did just want to follow up and say, you know, I requested to host this forum because of a lot of input that I was getting from various parents. So we had a forum to try to address some of the most common questions and also provide folks the appropriate channels for following up on their questions. So that focused on substitutes and staffing and changes to course offerings. And I'm happy to say that some of the follow-up to come out of that will be options for remediation for students who were behind due to having a substitute for the first few weeks of school. And also a community parent forum that will be scheduled to talk about molecular biology specifically. This was a course that had a lot of interest, so that will be forthcoming, as well as a number of district improvements to share information about staffing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Member Morawski. Member Vang.
Thank you, President Ryan. Last Friday, I visited two of my neighborhood schools, and as always, I walked away simply amazed at what our teachers and our school site staff are able to do with the little resources that they have. This evening, that evening, I also posted a statement on my personal page, and I wanted to take this opportunity during my board report to speak my truth and also reaffirm my position. I want to be clear that my statement tonight only represents myself, and it is my opinion. As one of 7 board members, I understand that I have a shared fiduciary responsibility to ensure the long-term financial health of this district and to also hold our superintendent accountable for improving student achievement. Over the past 3 years, I have tried to build and steer the ship to meet the needs of our students and families. Yesterday officially marked exactly 2 years when Mayor Steinberg, our teachers union, and the district officially announced at City Hall during a press conference that we have reached a tentative agreement. While there have been honest disagreements on components of that contract, the changes to the healthcare plan was clear to me. that any health care savings would be reinvested into the classroom and for additional student services. I voted to support this because this reinvestment was critical for our students. Using the healthcare savings for additional student services was a good idea then, and it is still a good idea now. During my tenure as a school board member, I have seen over and over how our staff simply do not have the resources at their disposal to ensure that every student can reach their full potential. And our students deserve every opportunity. I know that our incredible teachers, our superintendent, and this board have done some incredible work to have gains in this district, but we still have so much more work ahead. I became a school board member. Prior to that, I was a community organizer, and I ran for school board to be that voice to fight for resources for our students. And every decision that I have made has always been about the student. I will forever always keep them at the center of every decision I make. As someone who went through Sac City Unified School District, I remember having about 13 English teachers at Sac High before it became a charter school. Many of those teachers were subs. And it wasn't until Ms. Crowder came that she stayed with us and worked with us. As a board member, I have seen the same student population struggle, and I know that they desperately need resources. The physical challenges standing in front of us are daunting, but in many ways, the struggle this district endures are shared by so many other school districts. School districts across California and the U.S. have struggled with diminishing resources. Multiple labor groups have taken extraordinary steps to strike in an effort to protect working families and the students they serve. My message, really a call out to my colleagues, to my labor partners, to our parents and our students, is that we really need to come together. Instead of fighting each other for crumbs on the local level, we need to work together to bring more resources to protect our neighborhood schools. As part of the collective bargaining agreement our board, SETA, and Mayor Steinberg agreed to, we said we will work together in partnership for a ballot measure in 2020 that would provide a steady stream of funding for arts, music, other enrichment activities that we all desperately need. But for this to be successful, for any measure, whether that's a bond, we need to be on the same page and we need to work together. I am committed to rebuilding trust with our community, with our labor partners, with our parents, that we find a path forward to reinvest in our students. Every day we are losing resources in the classroom, and this only hurts our most vulnerable students when we don't implement the 2017 contract that we said we were. The students that suffer are our low-income students, our Black and brown students, our students with disability, our English language learners. Over the years as a community organizer, one thing has always remained clear for me. When our community, and I'm not talking about the board or just labor partners not getting along, but when us at Sacramento, when we're divided, we all lose. And at the end of the day, it's our student that lose, our most vulnerable students. We cannot achieve our shared goals of equity, of social justice for families without coming to the table together. The time is always right to do what's right. And that's keeping our promise to ensure resources goes back into our classroom to protect our neighborhood schools and our students. Thank you.
Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. I just want to bring something to everybody's attention. This morning's headlines on KCRA News as I was getting ready for work states possible school closures for Twin Rivers. Have you guys seen it? You know about it. You know, this district, Twin Rivers, they claim that they have a $3.8 million deficit and they've made $16.9 million in budget cuts. Twin Rivers is proposing to close 19 schools in their district. That is the district that I graduated from. And in fact, one of those high schools is my alma mater. This is a mix of elementary, junior high, and high schools. Now, I've been on this board for 7 years, along with Member Wu, and I'm going to bring you back to 2013, when we sat on this board and we had to propose to close 11 schools in our district. We were here till 3 a.m. listening to families crying for us not to close their schools. I attended every single one of those community meetings to hear people out. And though the vote did not go the way that I wanted it to go, the way that I voted, we still closed 7 schools in our most neediest areas. If you think this is not coming to us, you got another thing coming. It is coming. It is happening everywhere. Look around. It's not just California. It's happening everywhere. SUSD has a $26 million multi-budget deficit. And thank you, Member Vang, but you know what? No healthcare savings has been achieved. So all this outside noise that we've been hearing has really been a deterrent for us to do what is right. And, you know, I said on this dais before, I've been through 3 superintendents and 1 interim superintendent. And our current superintendent has given this board more information than any superintendent and the community, more information so we can do what's right and move forward together. I want to just say that, you know, I found the sign behind my screen here. Does everyone remember this? We've got to still stand for this, because this is not what's right for our kids, and school closures is not what's right for our students. So I just want you all, and I'll make a promise that I'll do what's right, and I hope that you will all join me on this board and this audience, and for those all throughout our district, that we will continue fighting for our kids.
Thank you, Board Member Pritchett. We're out of time for updates, but it looks like we had one more request for an announcement of a community meeting.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I forgot to mention there will be a community meeting on safe routes to school. It's focused on the Land Park, South Land Park area. It's hosted by Councilmember Steve Hansen and myself, and that's at Sutterville, November 12th at 6 p.m. And you can find it on Eventbrite.
Thank you, Board Member Morowski. Item 9.0, Board Workshop, Strategic Plan and Other Initiatives. 9.1, Student Achievement Presentation on the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium. Tonight's presentation will be conducted by Ed Aldridge, Christine Beta, and Vincent Harris.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, board members, and Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Vincent Harris. I'm the Chief Continuous Improvement and Accountability Officer. I'm joined by other district staff here, including Matt Turkey, one of our assistant superintendents, Dr. Ed Eldridge, who's our Director of Strategy and Continuous Improvement, our Chief Academic Officer, Christine Beta, and one of our principals, April Shafto from Tahoe Elementary. It's our pleasure this evening to discuss with you our most recent results from the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, or commonly known as SBAC. As everyone in the room generally knows, this is the 5th year since California's been measuring student performance and progress using the online SBAC, which are aligned with the Common Core state standards. As you know, these are rigorous and require students to use technology, think critically, write analytically, and solve complex math problems. The student performance is actually broken into 4 categories of achievement brands. Number 1, which is the proxy for not met, number 2 for nearly met, number 3 for met, and number 4 for exceed. What's important tonight is that we'll be talking about our students principally in categories 3 and 4. And as we think about this conversation, certainly the board, the community, and district staff all recognize we need to move more students into the 3 and 4 category. Our current performance is unacceptable. As we think about the presentation format for tonight, I'll begin just simply speaking at a high level about some of the areas of concern. Then we'll go through the actual data set to a large degree. And then we'll actually talk about some of the work that's encouraging in our system. We actually have sites that have done important work of growing student performance. And so that's really something we want to highlight this evening. And then we'll wrap up with Principal Shafto giving a sense of some of the emerging system work, where you'll see some of the bright spots in our system and our general effort to scale that work throughout the system. So in many of our presentations, we speak to the notion of the 3 things that are listed here in terms of seeing the system. System's perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. The board's core value, which tonight we'll actually be able to measure that. and that we'll see some of the inequities in our system, and these are the conditions that we're trying to interrupt. As we think about students performing at 3 and 4, met or exceeded on the SBAC results, we know those results are unacceptable. And so tonight we're going to be talking about the results and also our attempts then to disrupt them. And then finally, with that, we can realize the promise of the guiding principle, which speaks to this notion of equal opportunity to graduate with the greatest number of post-secondary choices from the widest array of options. But again, we want to anchor the conversation around the fact that we know our overall system performance is not where we need it to be, not where the community demands that it be, and not where the board has declared it wants it to be. And so as you look at the 3 bullets here, what we've simply done is frame the performance around categories of student groups, our special education, our homeless, our foster English learner students. You can see there, obviously our levels of students being met or exceeded are much lower than what we expect, and certainly are what we are driven to change immediately. And as we think about gaps within the system, we may have long-standing gaps. And I want to be clear, the point here isn't just to talk about the gap, but to talk about even when you look at the students at the higher end, in this context, white students, that performance is still unacceptable to us. Because obviously our goal is for all students to be met or exceeded. And then finally, as we benchmark our performance versus the county, state, and comparable districts, we see that we're kind of in the middle, lower middle, depending on the metric. And that's a key measure for us long run to see movement over time. And that's what we're committed to as district staff. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Dr. Ed Eldridge, and he'll take you into some of the various data sets this evening.
Good evening. As another way of helping to see our system, we reviewed our district's performance as compared to other districts with whom we collaborate, neighboring districts, and the performance of all schools in Sacramento County and the state. A quick glance at the ELA and math results for selected large urban surrounding unified districts revealed that SUSD falls in the bottom third of our comparable entities. Now, while there's a lot to do, our district did make a 3 percentage point gain in ELA performance, which is one of the highest in our comparable entities, and we also made a 1 point gain in mathematics. In this and the next few slides, we're going to highlight the results of our view of year-over-year SBAC results. Just as a point of reference, where positive year-over-year growth is identified, you will see the results highlighted with a shaded box around them. Now, our review revealed that based on the percentage of students who met or exceeded standards, the greatest grade level improvement was experienced at grades level 3, 5, 6, and 7, as the percentage of students meeting or exceeding standards exceeded in 18-19 than they did in 17-18. Results were mixed at grades 4 and 11, which both saw an increase in the percentage of students performing higher in the LA, but did not perform higher in math. And a level of concern was noted at grade 8, as ELA results were stagnant from 17-18 to 18-19, but actually decreased in math from 17-18 to 18-19.
I'm sure.
Now, this slide is organized by the variation in performance of our students by ethnic student group, and it speaks to the gap mentioned earlier in the presentation. There are significant disparities in the percentage of students performing at the top achievement level when considering race and ethnicity. For example, the white to black achievement gap in ELA and math is 42 and 41 points based on 18-19 results. You will see that the gap widened from 17-18, where the gap was 41 and 40%. So that's some work that we need to do. In reviewing the ELA results at the top of the slide, we see that the percentage of white, Filipino, 2 or more race identified, Asian, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, and Black students who exceeded or met standards increased from 2017-18 to 18-19. In reviewing the math results at the bottom of the slide, we see that even fewer student groups, namely white, Filipino, and Hispanic students, experienced an increase in the number of students performing at the top achievement levels. A similar analysis was performed for student groups within the federal Asian ethnic group classification. An increase in the percentage of students who exceeded or met standards in ELA and math was experienced by those students who identify as Korean, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Hmong. Results were mixed for other groups within the federal Asian classification. A review of SBAC results by student program revealed an increase in the performance of foster youth and English learner students in both ELA and math. Additionally, there was an increase in the percentage of socioeconomic disadvantaged students who exceeded or met standards in ELA.
The next slide is really meant to drive home this notion of all students. And so as we talk about student achievement, ultimately many ways to cut the data, there's many ways to disaggregate the data. This data pool, many of you remember, came out of conversations during our African American Achievement Task Force, where they pushed the conversation around. So what does it mean if we control for some of the variables? What does it mean if we control for attendance? What does it mean if we control for socioeconomic status? What does it mean if we control for no suspensions? Does that mean all students are achieving at the same level, which is one hypothesis that we wanted to test. And ultimately, as we think about this in the context of math or ELA, we see a difference. So for example, I'll point you to the African American bubble here, which speaks to students who have a 96% attendance rate or above, no suspensions. We're not socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so we see here the number grows from 24% to 50%. But in the context of our work, we still recognize there's a significant gap. So when you compare white to African American, and again, if you compare it to the absolute number, we still see the same gap, even if we control for some of the variables that one might say are positive to some degree. And so this actually is a call to action for the district to continue pushing into conversations at all of our sites about what does it mean to create conditions for success for all students, regardless of who that student is. With that, we'll now shift to some of the emerging bright spots in our system, and then of course to some of the system work. And with that, I'll turn over to Chief Academic Officer Bieda.
So clearly, I will just start by saying we have work to do for all of our children. When we look at achievement, it's easy to see that we are underserving most of our kids. But we need to look at, as Mr. Harris stated in the beginning, where are we finding the disruptions in the system so that we can start to look at growth and look at those bright spots as places where we know that some of the steps that we're taking to intervene and disrupt what we see in our patterning are really happening. So looking at growth is a really important metric to be looking at in addition to just analyzing achievement. Achievement is our public narrative, and we know that that is what is front-facing. But as a board and as a community and a system, we also need to be looking at, understanding, and analyzing growth.
So while much of our analysis focused on the traditional disaggregation of students' results by the achievement levels such as standard exceeded or standard met, this type of analysis that we're showing you right now has a built-in limitation, that type of analysis has a built-in limitation of not accounting for growth that does not result in a student level change. The type of analysis that we're going to show you now focuses on growth, and it does account for that type of change. So to account for the limitation of just looking at the change in student achievement level, we're going to show you the difference from MET, which is also the basis of the California Dashboard Academic Accountability. So what you're seeing on the top line here is for Father Keith B. Kinney School, for example, in 2017-18, they had a negative 44 difference from MET metric, which meaning that on average, the students there scored 44 points just below the standard MET cut point. In 2018-19, the students scored 17 points just below the standard MET cut point, which means that from 2017-18 to 2018-19, they had a 27-point increase in the difference from MET growth metric. Now, when we did our analysis district-wide, we highlighted several schools in grades 4 through 6, and also in I'll do 4 through 6 first. Grades 4 through 6 ELA, and we looked at the top 5 schools that had that change in distance from MET. And so you're going to see Father Keith B. Kinney highlighted there, but you'll also see several other schools that made overall distance from MET increases significant for overall, but also by various student groups, such as economic disadvantage, English learner, and special education.
And as we recognize our leaders and our teachers and the staff that is working to disrupt what we see in the patterning of underperformance for our students, what I'd like to take a quick moment to do is, I know that in our audience, I see some of our leaders who work so hard for our kids each and every day. And if we have any leaders or teachers or staff members in the audience who have their school names represented up here in our leaders in disruption and growth, I would please invite you to right now, please stand and let us give you a great big round of applause.
Yay!
Again, we know that achievement is our front-facing data, and in a high poverty district, when you look at our achievement and the work that we're doing, we don't often get opportunities like we do with growth to stop and celebrate the disruption in the work that really is taking place on our sites.
Thank you, Ms. Beta.
Similar to our analysis for grades 4 and 6, we also performed an analysis for students in grades 7 through 8, and we found that Albert Einstein was recognized as a top school for disproportionate growth in ELA and math for all students and for each of the identified student groups. Fern-Bacon was also recognized as the top growth school in math for all students and for each identified student groups. And again, you'll see a number of schools recognized for this accomplishment for their growth from 2017-18 to 2018-19.
And when we're looking at this middle school band, I think this is an area for us as a board and a community to really focus our attention and our work. I'd like to recognize our leaders and our staff members again who are helping our children to achieve these results, and have a call to action for us to continue to focus on these middle school years. They're critical years, and I want to send out a great big huge thank you to leaders and staff members who are here this evening helping to achieve the results for our kids. Could you please stand? We'd love to give you a round of applause. Middle school is a really important and really tough space. And now, speaking of our fabulous leaders, I'd like to bring up Miss April Shafto from Tahoe Elementary School. This is my mother's alma mater, and it's my mom's birthday. So it's an absolute honor to have April come up and share with you some of the systemic work that is helping to lead this disruption.
Good evening. So I know that we see a lot of numbers and a lot of data, but I would like to just add a personalized context for the board. So at Tahoe, we began our improvement work by looking at the California dashboard as part of our needs assessment. And in conjunction with my leadership team, we dove into the dashboard as a starting point for our inquiry into areas to focus our improvement efforts. In looking at the dashboard, we could see that our math performance outcomes were less than desirable, as demonstrated by the orange indicator. It was clear to us that we had a need to really focus on math. From here, we had more questions about our math performance as a site. We wanted to know how each grade level performed independent of the summary data, and we were interested in digging into more specific data in terms of our student groups. This led us to the PATI, a district tool that provides site leaders additional lenses for looking at data. As you can see here in the district PATI snapshot, the PATI allows us to see the performance of the district's 3rd through 6th graders on the SBAC. It illustrates that the number of students who met or exceeded standards was 34% in the first data set. It also shows us in the second that the number of students who did not meet or nearly met standards is at 65%. Further, it shows that 36% of students grew by 1 or more achievement band, and that 76% of the district students maintain their status as meeting or exceeding standard. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we can get a better look at how disproportionately our student groups are represented within the meeting or exceeding achievement band by looking at the disproportionality tab for this data set. Since our school team in particular has committed to understanding how all student groups are performing and to improving outcomes for all students, we spent some time as a staff thinking and learning about disproportionality and how it applied to our improvement work. By studying this tab within the PATI, we were able to see a table, much like you see here, representing the district data. First, let me walk you through this. We noticed that of all the 3rd through 6th grade students in the district who took the SBAC, 34.4% of them met or exceeded the standard. The red line you see going down the center of the infographic represents that 34.4%. Any data to the left of the red line means that particular student group is underrepresented among students who met or exceeded the standard. It would essentially mean that less than 34% of that student group met or exceeded the standard. Any data shown to the right indicate that student group is overrepresented, meaning that student group has more than 34% of their members represented in the achievement band. When we look at the African American student group, for example, we see that only 15.2% of our 3rd through 6th grade African American students met or exceeded standards compared to 34.4% of their peers. That's startling. What we don't see here is that other groups, such as students identified as GATE or RFEP, are overrepresented in the meeting or exceeding achievement band. In essence, what this disproportionality tab does is vividly reveal our instructional successes and failures among our student groups. For Tahoe, our disproportionality data helped my staff and I better understand and identify where we were struggling to impact in a positive way some of our most disadvantaged students. With this information, we began to look at our system to try and identify what was happening at the ground level that was within our sphere of impact that was actively contributing to poor student outcomes. Over several months and working in partnership with my leadership team, my staff at large, and site council, we identified what we thought were some of the most significant root causes contributing to poor student achievement and disproportionality among our students. We prioritized these and began to narrow our focus towards the creation of an aim statement that would address our greatest area of concern. We drafted, we redrafted, I pulled my hair out, some eyelashes too. We revised and edited until together we came up with an achievement aim that was measurable, specific, time-bound, and attainable. We wanted to be clear in our aim. We wanted to make sure that we knew what we were trying to accomplish. And we wanted to make sure that the change we implemented, we would know that it showed improvement. This became our first goal in our school plan. For Tahoe, the process of implementing improvement work has really been more of a learning journey. Together with our staff and school community, we've learned to look at our failures as opportunities to study what went wrong and learn from these mistakes. This has been difficult. We've learned to use different lenses to look at data so that we can more easily identify and call out specific areas on our system where we can frankly do better. We've learned to question, consider, and research in order to disrupt these systems. We are truly investing ourselves in this urgent work to improve outcomes for all Tahoe students, as all of my colleagues are. And we will continue to do so as we implement and monitor our achievement goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So as we work to ensure that we are providing equitable and rigorous learning opportunities that will lead to academic achievement for each and every student in Sacramento City Unified School District, you can hear that we do have in process some work that is starting to disrupt our system, and we hope and know that that's going to really start to happen this school year. You heard April speak specifically about what our leaders are doing and our sites are doing, our training specialists are doing, our teachers are doing around our work with continuous improvement. Each month, our principals come for rigorous training. Our instructional assistant superintendent team provides a rigorous training cycle for them and then goes into the schools to ensure that they have the supports that they need so that we're really focusing on student data and looking very iteratively, quickly, and closely so that we can see is what we're doing working, and if not, what do we need to do differently and better? That's one of our important next steps. We also have a fabulous next step in a partnership with the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence. We've been partnered with Judy Elliott, and she's teaching us about hanging the hooks for things like high quality instruction and ensuring that we have all the hooks up and ready to go so that we can continue the disruptions that we see in our schools that are demonstrating such growth. We're also looking at how to continue to improve our work with our ELA adoption. It has some fabulous pieces to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our English language learners and our students who are general education students first, but who are also receiving special education supports. Our teachers are administering common assessments, and we're hearing some really exciting stories about utilizing the ELA adopted materials to provide diagnostic and prescriptive support for for our kids. So we're really looking forward to continuing to disrupt, continuing to see more growth, and hoping that all those pieces move forward with our public data and achievement continuing to look more and more like what we know we can do in Sac City Unified. We'd like to turn it over to the board now and answer any questions that you may have.
Before we take board member questions, we're going to take public comments. Elliot, do we have any public comments at this time?
We do have one from Sarah Williams Kingsley.
Okay.
Feels a little strange. Hi, everyone. I'm here because my own child's school had the greatest year-over-year decline of any school in our district this year. I've been up here talking about my child's school over and over now for several months. We have a suspension problem. We have an attendance problem. Our year-over-year data on the CASP for, let's see, for English, it went from 39.49% at end of year 2018 to 32.14% in 2019, a 7.35% annual decline in 1 year. And in math, we went from 38.85% standard met or exceeded in 2018 to 30.3% in 2019.
Ms. Kingsley, will you remind us of the school that your son is
My
at?
child attends Isidore Cohen Elementary
Cohen,
School.
thank you.
It's a small school in East Sac, has an enrollment of about 270 kids. 25% of our students are students with disabilities. 25% at least of our students are Black. Several more percentage points are other brown children. Our free and reduced price lunch is at 86%. It's a school that has serious problems. I've been on the school site council for 2 years. We have a significant amount of money to spend for a school site of its size, $131,000 in our SIPSA to allocate to various projects. We are not seeing progress. And I know that our school site is a part of the MTSS pilot project, and I'm on the school site council, but I want to, yes, you're promoting the schools that are seeing increases, but I want you to know that there are schools that are not seeing those increases.
Thank you, Ms. Kingsley. And I think when we get to our board member questions, we can address some of that. Thank you.
We do have one additional comment that just came in from Allison French-Tubo.
Hello, I am actually reading this remark on behalf of Alina Cervantes, who is watching at home and has asked us to speak her words. So as she says, many parents are watching live from home and are asking me to speak. Here's my 2 cents. May Vang, how dare you use Black and brown children in your campaign speech tonight? You told me you would always put our children first, and we all know that leading us over a fiscal cliff is not that. We all were waiting to see how long it would take for SCTA to flip you once you announced your run, and it didn't take long. I guess if you win your city council race, you won't be around to clean up the mess. Parents will remember how you sold out our kids.
So we'll take board member questions and comments now. Board member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. I just wanted to address Sarah in regard to Isidore Cohen. Isidore Cohen is one of my schools in Area 3, and I'm very familiar with what's happening there and keeping tabs. But I do have some questions from staff in regard to schools like Isidore Cohen. So Isidore Cohen is a very split school, very diverse school. In fact, they have a GATE program there. But I want to know in regard to the study and how those numbers fluctuate. Isidore Cohen has a great amount of transient students, and a lot of that is based on a lot of apartment complexes that are right around Isidore Cohen. And I've worked with the principal over the years and had conversations about the apartment complex will get a new owner and they'll go and evict all the families. And then we have families coming in and out. We just, over the years, I think as long as I've been on this board, we've had, a lot of discussion about transient families. And I want to know, how does that reflect in these numbers that you're reporting?
And if we can pause the clock, so per this new board member format, we have 15 minutes total for board member questions. So if you can pause the clock and then respond.
Ultimately, your point's well taken on transiency. Now, it's not a filter we have as a part of the standard presentation, but we do study it. So let me promise that we'll get back to you through a board communication that provides a more detailed breakdown. But
I would assume that number that Ms. Kingsley was reporting is really, that number would fluctuate because of the transient students. Is that correct?
There'd be an element of impact. But,
Yeah.
But I certainly wouldn't speak to it being all causal.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I would love for you to come back with a future report. I appreciate Ms. Kingsley for keep bringing it and just keep fighting for those students. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pritchett. Just real quickly, we could also come back and just provide an overview, again, from a growth perspective, which looks at the same students, if you will, as opposed to overall data.
So is there a way, based on that, is there a way that we can track our students when they move into another Sac City school and being able to track them individually and their growth?
So as part of our BC, we can provide the growth analytics that we just shared for students who were mobile during the previous year. So we can see if a student had more than one school, for example, in the 18-19 school year, and then rerun that analysis to account for their growth.
Okay, and not completely related to those numbers, but I guess something that I would be interested as well is like how many students in regard to the schools that have high transient students coming in and out, how many of those students are actually staying in our district and how many are moving out? Because as you know, Isidore Cohen is right on the border, and those parents have a lot of options. They can send their kids to the Cordova schools or the Folsom Cordova schools. They can send them to San Juan or they can send them to Elk Grove. It's just a matter of really 5 minutes right over the river or 5 minutes down the road. So I'd like to know how many of those students are actually staying in our communities.
Thank you, Board Member Pritchett. I know we'll be gathering that data. Board Member Minnick?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for bringing these positive points of data to us today, and to see how many schools are having this, having some movement forward, which I think we need to really appreciate. And I especially appreciated all the site staff and site leaders who came. I saw like Mary and Manuel and Rosario and Twan and Matt and a bunch of others. The fact that they came out tonight means that, we really want to highlight and celebrate the things that are going well. And so I really appreciate it. It's nice to hear some of this and look out and see, some of those people that are making it happen. And so thank you for bringing this, and, in a situation, in a time where we hear a lot of negative stuff, sometimes it's easy to forget all the cool things that are happening. And I'm reminded a lot of times when I go places and parents or, friends of mine will say like, oh, how's it going on the school board? I'm like, oh, it's a little rough. And people are like, oh, really? What's happening? And then I realized that like, there are plenty of people that are having these positive experiences with their kids at our sites and aren't thinking about all this drama, right? And I always appreciate when those people don't know what we're dealing with. So it's nice to have these positive moments. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you, Board Member Minnick. Board Member Garcia.
Yes, thank you. I too want to thank you for highlighting some positives in student achievement, and then also celebrating all the hard work that's happening at school sites, right? But I did want to maybe ask if you can maybe share a little bit more. When you unpack this data, if you can share sort of what are some of the differences or what are some of the impacts that are causing a difference in terms of an increase, and maybe what sort of things are you seeing when there's stagnation, and what are you looking at, or what are you seeing in terms of a decline? Because, for example, by grade level, there's been some decline in 11th grade, as well as other grades. And also, I noticed that with the by Asian race category, there was 70% for the ELA and math for Korean students, and then there was a sharp dip from 70 to 55%, and then it goes back up to 83. So to me, there's something going on there. So I don't know if you have that information that maybe you can share with us today as to what's happening when there's a huge decline, when there's stagnation, and when there's a huge increase. And then I do have one other question after that.
Yeah, I'd say the core of your question, Board Member Garcia, we're studying. So I don't want to over speculate in terms of all the variables that are playing out. So we'll get back to you with some context around that.
Okay. And then, and when would that happen? When do we get to hear sort of what's behind all this, and how you're analyzing the data in terms of all these, the movement?
Right. So, ultimately there's a series of things that play out, right? Some of this is school-wide analysis that we're doing. And so that's why we focused on our concluding comments about the ELA adoption, because we're certainly seeing some positive attributes of that. As you speak to kind of individual case studies, that actually requires another layer of analysis to try and tease out exactly the matched students and their experiences, kind of, because of course at a summative level, there's lots of stories underneath. We've heard that tonight, right? Some schools are up, some schools are down. We have more, obviously information around some of the schools that are moving, because obviously we've been in contact with those principals. For schools that are declining, there's a host of things that we're looking at. So I would say within probably, the next 2 to 3 weeks, we may be in a position to offer, again, some greater insight on the overall data set where we're seeing the declines. But again, obviously it's a study that we have to do, and so we're making time to do that. So we present to you data points that are credible.
Okay, great, thank you. And then my last question, what do some of these disruptions look like in the classroom? I'm trying to visualize that, and I just don't know what that looks like.
I'd like to share with a little brevity one of the improvement science team meetings that I attended last year at Tahoe Elementary School that might highlight a little bit, and then April can share what it looks like more from the classroom perspective. But what's happening is teachers are agreeing on a skill set that they're teaching children specifically in math. Was it Claim 1? In Claim 1. And so the teachers teach this, they agree on how they're going to teach. They do it for the entire week. They come in together and then bring in an assessment. They call it a ticket out the door. It's an agreed upon item that they agree they'll give the children that assesses this skill. And then I sat with them and watched them. The training specialist was there, but Ms. Shafto was really the grand facilitator in helping the teachers to analyze the errors as well as the correct responses and mindsets around math. And then they made decisions about what to do with each group of learners depending on what they needed next, and then went back into the classroom for the next week to do that specific targeted work for the children, and then came back again the following week with additional assessments to discuss and decide on what the next learning steps would be. That is a powerful disruption that is that's really spreading this year. Some schools were jumping in last year, but that's really moving through our schools this year very, very strategically. It's a little bit like the terrible fires that Ms. Eng was talking about, but in this case, they're really positive, and it's a nice storm. But Principal Shafto can speak to what that looks like a little bit more, I would say, from the classroom perspective.
She did a very good job. So yeah, for us, we were really interested in looking at, we were seeing some disparity in performance amongst our teachers. So one of the things that we were interested in looking at in terms of our systems and how they were producing these negative outcomes for students was building some teacher efficacy. So really just building a better common understanding of what teaching and learning should look like in the classroom. And so the work that we were doing, as Christine so eloquently described, was really about kind of starting at a ground level to sort of build that collaboration and build some common understanding about those practices. And then from there was so many wonderful good things that grew out of that. So, at Tahoe, we have a very small school. We're a small school. And so, for example, this year we don't even have a straight fifth grade. We have multiple splits in our intermediate grades. And what that does over time is it really isolates and creates islands amongst our teachers. And so this process of improvement work has really helped reinstill the collaborative process, because even though you might be teaching a 4-5 split and I might be teaching a 5-6 split, we can still talk common language about improvement. And we can still talk about what change ideas that we're going to put into play. It might look different in terms of standards, right? But the change idea itself is going to be common. And so now we're speaking a common language when we come together and we look at the work that the students are producing. And we can calibrate that work together and we can bounce ideas off of each other. So really it has been a very fruitful and amazing, like I said, journey. We're still on it. We've gone an inch. It's 10 miles, but there's all these subtle nuances within the work that creates the disruption, not just the change idea, but all the pieces that sort of click along as you go.
Thank you. That was very helpful. So I really appreciate you getting into the weeds as to what it looks like and how it plays out at the school site level and in the classroom. So thank you.
Member Morowski, followed by Member Wu.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the role of early literacy and early intervention in the primary grades. Can you speak to that? I mean, I just, as the students are going through the years, if that foundation is not built, then we're not going to see those great outcomes we want, right? Or there's a lot of remediation that needs to happen. So, can you address maybe how you're looking at that specifically? And then also, I just wanted to mention, I have asked for breakouts of academic achievement by our schools that have specialty programs, and so I think that's also a good way to break out the data, to make sure that you're looking at programs that operate within a school, because they often function like a school within a school. So I think it's really, really critical to look at that as well.
Excellent point, Member Morowski, please.
So you're spot on. You cannot build a foundation for ensuring that all of our students have the most post-secondary choices from the widest array of options without building a strong foundation in early literacy. What we're doing in pre-K and all the way through to really third grade, where we're learning to read, and then in fourth grade we make a switch into reading to learn. We have to build that foundation with so much strength that no matter what, the kids bounce right back up as they're navigating the learning. So what we know is that we have our new benchmark advanced curriculum. We know that we have our common assessments that are really putting out information on phonemic awareness, phonics, sight words. Our teachers have more prescriptive information and are able then to provide more targeted instruction for kids than we've been able to see. And the other piece, when we talk about across a district, we can now look to see how our children responding to the learning and what might we need to provide as far as professional learning and additional supports to ensure that the phonemic awareness, the phonics, all that early literacy is being built really strong. We cannot build if we're building it on quicksand, and if we're building literacy that's not strong in those early years, that's what we'll build on. So that's a very important place, and I know that Principal Shafto had something she wanted to share.
To your point, I just wanted to add that I have the pleasure of working with many talented colleagues, and I can tell you that, we have many areas that we're working on in tandem. So for example, while our number one SIPSA goal at the moment is math, we also have a goal around foundational literacy. And so at my site in particular, our primary staff is very focused on PDSA cycles around phonics specifically and time on phonics instruction and differentiation. And my intermediate is focused on our math improvement aim. So I think that there's multiple things happening at sites all at one time.
So we're going to have to do learning sessions. Thank you. Board Member Wu.
So congratulations on those schools that are doing well and doing better. What are the plans that we have for taking it up for those schools that are failing or not doing as near as well? Those who are falling below statewide standards.
Ms. Beta?
Well, we're sharing with you some of the disruption that we're doing as we're continuing to work through our improvement science work. All of that begins with those needs assessment, and I think that Principal Shafto led us through what that looks like in looking at and analyzing the data. I think she also brings up a really good point, especially in our elementary segment, where we're building that foundation to learn to read and to learn all of our foundational math skills. In our elementary segment, our teachers are working to learn and to build it all. And so we heard about a school where we know that we have concerns. All of our schools are engaged in our improvement science work. And in all of our schools, we're looking at what does growth look like at those schools and working to ensure that they have the supports, including the work with the principal that we're doing on the monthly basis. And then principals are continuing to help teachers to have their collective time that they have each week. And we know that collective efficacy, that work that they do together, is one of the most powerful times that teachers have to continue to build their work. And we're going to keep working to make sure that that time is strong. And for our schools that are failing, we need to really be continuing this work and continuing to support our leaders and our teachers. But it's a concern, Member Wu. It is a deep concern.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Wu. I have a couple of questions, and then Superintendent Aguilar has a final comment. So I'm looking at slide 6, and I have to tell you what's very troubling to me is looking at our lowest performing subgroups being Black or African American and Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, both for percentage of students who exceeded or met standards in ELA and in math. I think that we have, a great deal of data that bears out these statistics. I know that we have an upcoming presentation that will talk about, in particular, the crises for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students. I'm going to be bringing a report to the board that we're doing in my day job for the Campaign for College Opportunity, analyzing the educational inequities that are facing those populations in particular, and we'll be releasing them in the coming months. But my question is, because of the level of disparity that we're seeing for these two subgroups, are you beginning to develop a plan based on where you've seen other districts who have actually been able to defy those odds? And what are your theories around those low educational attainment rates and the size of the gap?
I think looking at other districts that are making growth in these areas is a really important place to start to frame our work. One of the places that I have been looking is at what growth data looks like and how to continue to pierce that for all of our children. But again, when we looked at some of what Principal Shafto showed and shared, and we can look at our disproportionality tabs in our PTI and work to really understand at the site level, the grade level, the school level, what the needs are of the students at that school. And I think sometimes we have to be really cautious about making assumptions about a group of children and thinking that all of the needs in that group are the same. We really need to be looking at each student, find out their needs, have diagnostic assessments so that we know what their specific needs are and be able to move in and serve that student and that family's needs. Sometimes if we think that we're going to jump in and ensure that we're going to put in a plan that is just for all of our African American students, those children's needs are not the same. And the reasons they're excelling or failing are not all the same. And so we have to know our kids by name and need, and we have to have the data that helps us to make that movement for them.
So I so appreciate that honest and right on answer. And I think that one of the things that helps us get there is the early intervention information system, which allows us to, by each child and their in particular need, their unique life experience, address those concerns. And so I'm very happy to hear that. I do just want to point out again, you know, for me, a troubling data point is even for students at 96+% attendance, no suspensions, not socioeconomically disadvantaged, there still is a huge achievement gap for our Black or African American students. And so once again, if we're meeting every student by need, we need to understand why that disparity exists and if it in fact is because the system itself is not designed to meet those students' needs. And then my final just question and comment is around the data for grade span 4 to 6 and the data for grade span 7 to 8 in terms of rate of growth. I think it's really telling that Father Keith B. Kenny, one of our most socioeconomically disadvantaged schools, historically Black serving school, is seeing the greatest growth for economically disadvantaged, for English learner, for special education, the only school that meets all of those categories. And we're seeing the same for Albert Einstein at the 7 to 8, economically disadvantaged, English language learner, and special ed. So what do you attribute that to? How do we lift up that bright spot and recognize that they are doing something that could be replicated for the benefit for other students?
The school that I can speak to with enough clarity to share with you right now so that I could be fully transparent and honest would be Father Keith B. Kenny, because I've been there IAS. It's a very structured school with very high expectations around instruction. And there's clarity. You can walk from classroom to classroom and see high quality instruction in every single classroom that looks like from the most effective teacher to the teacher who's working the hardest to learn, you can see a through line in the expectation across the entire site. The other thing that I can say about Keith B. Kenny is there is not a moment of instructional time to waste. The children are in their classrooms. They are not waiting to be taken into their classrooms as they make their transitions from at recess and lunch and throughout their day. There's not a moment wasted. Every single second is being utilized to improve outcomes for kids at that school. And you can see it if you walk. I would invite you to take some time and spend some time over there. And it's really clear that there are really high expectations for the principal, for the vice principal, for all the staff, for the teachers, and for the children. Very high expectations.
And I would invite my fellow board members to join me for a visit. Gail Johnson, her team, the teachers are amazing over there. And I just want to thank Principal April Shafta. What an inspirational leader you are. I'm so grateful for the way you're leaning into this difficult work at Tahoe Elementary. And on every level, I've been hearing how you've been courageously tackling this head on. So thank you. Superintendent Aguilar.
Thank you, President Ryan. I just want to be very clear that I want to acknowledge the board's compliments around some of the bright spot data and the growth data, but I do want to just remind ourselves and be very clear, crystal clear about it, is that we have presented data that should be very disturbing to all of us. For large populations of our students who are not achieving at the level that they deserve to achieve, that their families deserve to be, to celebrate because of the work that we are doing as a district. So I don't want to walk by that. Please download this presentation, keep it for yourself so that you can continue to remind us of this The other thing that I want to make very clear is we shouldn't have this discussion once a year based on an assessment that only happens once a year. That is a clear injustice for a community that we would be sitting here waiting until next year to see if any of these data have moved in any of the directions that we would like to see. I also want to be clear that as members of our board asked questions, again, what I said earlier, we have to remain committed to looking at data by name, by need, and by the inequity that they're still suffering in our system. The PTI system that Principal Shafto mentioned allows our leaders to go straight to the individual name of the student that is suffering that injustice or has a need, and it's on us to make sure that we respond as quickly as possible. We like to say that we have to change conditions in the present, not look a year into this and say, what should we have done for the past few months? I also want to recognize all of our site leaders. Principal Shafto mentioned it a little bit, pulling her hair as she was leading a team of other staff members and colleagues, because what she was describing is our attempt to temper and shift the mindset away from solutionitis. We have fallen into the trap of coming up with solutions far too quickly without studying the root causes that are manifesting themselves in the outcomes. And so to Member Garcia's excellent question, I am looking forward to sharing with our board every individual SIPSA plan that calls for every site leader to do a comprehensive root cause analysis to unpack why it is that we think that we are getting the outcomes that we are getting. So imagine in a few months when we can see every one of our school site SIPSA plans with a comprehensive assessment of the root causes for the outcomes that they are achieving. And so and how each of those SIPSAs are going to inform our LCAP, and how that LCAP is going to inform our budget that we propose in June of 2020. And just a couple of other things. Ms. Shafto mentioned this, and Ms. Bieda. We are trying our best to shift the mindset where failure is seen as a treasure. And this idea that we are going to be studying what's happening on an ongoing basis so that we can assess very quickly through very rapid cycles if a change that we introduce in a system is working or not, and adopt a mindset where we make tough decisions whether we're going to adopt that change, whether we're going to adapt that change, or whether we're going to abandon that change. And be very mature when it's necessary to abandon something that we thought was going to work well. So I just want to, again, acknowledge our team, but again, ask everyone to hold us accountable. And please do download this presentation and carry it with you when you see me around or you see any of our staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of your hard work. Moving on to item 9.2, approve the modified non-school site-based resource officer contract. Tonight will be presented by, will not be presented by Lisa Allen. I know there was an emergency. Will be presented by Nathaniel Browning, Raul Bazio, and is there anyone else that I should be acknowledging?
Yes, President Ryan. I would like to invite Deputy Chief Kathy Lester, Lieutenant Stephen Moore, and Sergeant Justin Brown to join us as well. Good evening, President Ryan, Superintendent Aguilar, and board members. Unfortunately, Lisa Allen couldn't make it tonight, so I have some big shoes to fill tonight, but we'll do my best. I'm Nathaniel Browning, Board Policy and Governance Manager. I'm here with Raul Bozio, our legal counsel, and to my right, Deputy Chief Kathy Lester, Lieutenant Stephen Moore, and Sergeant Justin Brown. We're here tonight to ask you to approve a modified non-school site-based resource officer contract with the Sacramento Police Department for the 1920 school year. Tonight's presentation will focus on the role and scope of the non-school site-based resource officers and their sergeant. We will review the role and the responsibilities of the site admin. And review the data tracking and sharing pieces that are within the contract, and provide an update on the questioning and apprehension board policy that we've been working on. So a little background over the past 8 to 10, 12 months. Before then, we've had many years where we've had a contract with Sac Police Department. And mostly of those contracts, we've had 8 officers and 1 sergeant. Those 8 officers have resided within our 5 comprehensive high schools, American Legion, and a couple floaters. The most recent contract, full-length contract, ended June 30, 2018. Last year, the board approved a supplemental 1-year contract for the same number of SROs and sergeant. Since July 1st, 2019, staff have been working on trying to reimagine school safety, similar to what we talked about in August, the August 15th, 2019 meeting. So the modified version of the police department contract consists of 1 sergeant and 3 SRO officers who will be assigned to geographical zones. The main responsibilities of the sergeant will include the following: supervise, train, coach, counsel, and evaluate. Work closely with our director of school safety. As a side note, our director of school safety is a position that we're currently going through the hiring process of, and hopefully we'll have that position filled soon. The sergeant will also be the point contact for any emergency responders and patrol, and also oversee the collection and management and reporting of daily data logs. And also they will attend community meetings whenever available, not being called out on emergencies and such like that. The non-school site resource officers will patrol the district in geographical zones, which I'll show you a map of later. Will not be remain stationed at a school site and stagnant, but rather keep patrolling. And assist the site in developing comprehensive school site safety plans and address issues related to their appropriate role as law enforcement officers. So here are the 3 geographical zones that we had discussed at the August 15th board meeting. The map before you illustrates the number of calls that took place to the SRO unit from January 2019 through May 2019. So these geographical zones were then divided up based on the number of calls in each category. So each zone, as you see in the legend down on the bottom left, on the bottom right, have in parentheses the number of calls in each zone. So they're all relatively equal. So this slide also should look familiar from the August 15th board meeting. This outlines some of the roles of site administrators, and I'll get to law enforcement side here in a minute. These are also outlined in the draft policy that is currently working its way through the policy committee and gaining feedback from some of our key staff and law enforcement partners as well. Here are the law enforcement roles and responsibilities. I know previously in August, there was a question about the fourth bullet on this list to investigate safety and welfare checks. And yes, we do have school social workers that assist with that, but there's also a role for our SOR, our law enforcement partners as well. So one piece that you'll find in the contract and the agenda packet is this idea around data tracking and sharing. It's been one piece that has been brought up by the board and pieces of data that we've been collecting as well. So the non-site-based resource officers will collect and share the following data with the district. As also discussed in the August 15, 2019 meeting, we do plan to have, as soon as the director of school safety is onboarded, to have regular community meetings to review these data points with them. Here are the initial data that we've been collecting this fall. So as you can see, a large portion, 54% of the calls relate to student safety. So student safety, just to clarify, are a number of things such as missing students, stranger danger, student group fights, parent altercations with students, vehicle versus students, child abuse, and sexual assault. Campus threats are another issue, which include intruders on campus, parent-to-student threats, social media threats, and similar. And then staff safety, which is staff versus student concerns. Community safety is also lockdowns or shots fired. And other includes custodial disputes, parent versus parent, or robbery. So as I said earlier, a component to the Reimagining School Safety presentation in August was around this draft policy, questioning and apprehension and police interaction with students. This was last shared with the board policy committee last month. And from there, the board policy committee requested that the 11 to 12 page document be broken up into two separate policies, one dealing with questioning and apprehension and one dealing a little bit more around roles and responsibilities, specifically of what admin do and what the admin role is. That is very similar to how Elk Grove developed two very similar policies in November and December 2018. So for the next policy committee coming up on the 19th of November, we're actually going to mirror very closely what Elk Grove did in two of the three policies that they recently adopted in relation to this, and bring that forward to the policy committee for review later this very month. As I said, the policy really focuses on the roles of site administrators and non-school site-based resource officers. The policy itself really focuses on the administrator role because that is what the district, that's the district end of this partnership. As also previously stated, it was initially based on ACLU sample language, and we're going to link it closely with the Elk Grove policies and how they've gone about doing it. Here are some of the topics covered in that policy. So recommendations and next steps obviously would be to approve the modified non-school site-based resource officer contract. We also want to come back to the board with a safety update in February 2020. We understand that we are in uncharted territory, so we want to monitor this very closely, continue to work with our law enforcement partners and make sure that the board is aware of progress and any kind of changes as needed. And also, we plan to bring forward the sample policies that I've referenced here and before in January for the board's initial first reading. We understand that the contract and the policy are very similar and kind of coupled in many ways. We also know that as the policy is being developed, that we are working with our site administrators and other staff to better understand what their role is in this reimagining what school safety looks like. So even though as we're still working on the policy and it has not been board adopted, we're all moving towards that direction. And with that, any questions?
So do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. We have 12. Please come to the podium as your name's called. Tanya Muskoff, April Masados, Cecile Nunley, Danielle Prince.
Okay, and we'll have 2 minutes for each public comment.
Hi, my name is Tanya Perez-Muskoff. I have a 9th grader at CKM and an 8th grader at Cal Middle. I also live around the corner from McClatchy. I'm a neighbor to the school and understand some of the concerns regarding safety as both a parent and a community member. Lisa Murawski, I noticed earlier when you spoke about the meetings you recently held, you neglected to mention your pop-up safety meeting earlier this week. You also didn't mention the Google Doc form that parents could fill out regarding SRO school safety concerns in light of tonight's board meeting if they could not attend your pop-up. I do hope you keep your promise and consider the many people that reached out to you regarding this via the forum. I am deeply concerned that this board reduced the SRO program this school year. You admittedly made this decision in haste and without any proper backup plan to your decision. Mr. Aguilar, this decision is a case of solutionitis that you mentioned earlier in tonight's meeting. I can't wrap my head around the fact that even in your agreement with Sac PD, you state the district desires to limit SRO presence on district campuses and as a result understands that this agreement will limit the ability of the Sacramento Police Department to respond to critical incidents and other emergencies on district properties. One thing you're not wrong about is the understanding that Sac PD will be limited in responding to critical incidences. For example, recently my husband broke up an after-school brawl that included approximately 40, 50 students. Without an SRO, it took Sac PD 25 minutes to get to the scene. This is only one of the many fights I know about in the 2 months school has been in session this year. How are administrators, teachers, and community members supposed to deal with a population controls in situations like this? I can't even have a school PTO fundraiser for 100 people without hiring 2 security personnel to stay during the duration of the entire event, but SCUSC can have over 2,500 students without any security measures besides a floating SRO.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. Thank you so much. My name is April Mazaris. I am a community member. I live near CK McClatchy, and I have students at various schools within the district. I want to read back to you information that you provided at your February 7th, 2019 board meeting in regards to SROs. Your background and rationale for that meeting states that the Sacramento City Unified School District has had a strong partnership with the City of Sacramento Police Department for more than 9 years. The SROs work closely with schools. They establish and maintain constant contact with school administrators and respond to school safety issues. SROs maintain a highly visible and open presence on each campus to encourage positive student interaction. This agreement calls for 8 police officers and 1 sergeant. You also state that your driving governance for this is research based on a 2-year study of the SRO program on school campuses. And you mentioned specifically that SROs prevent or minimize property damage on the school and surrounding areas. They reduce the need for schools to call 911. They reduce the likelihood that a student will get a criminal record, and they increase feelings of safety among students and staff. You specifically state in this document that these close working relationships have proven critical in recent years when the district has received a number of serious threats to schools and the Cerna Center. In their role on campus, SROs are not only serving in capacity of law enforcement, but serve also as mentors, role models, mediators, trainers, and helpers. You then go on to August and make such a huge shift. As our district reimagines our school safety plan, it is obvious that you have no reliable data to show what kind of impact this may have on our campuses. I ask you this evening that with your new plan, please also inform the community how you plan to address the rest of your next steps as outlined in your 2019 plan to reimagine school safety. You stated that we developed solutions too quickly, and this is one instance of that. Thank you.
Good evening, board members. One of the things that I did, I took some time and I actually read the contract. Oops, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
And I was just noticing a few items that I had some questions on. On item number 7, it talks about the city represents that all the SROs will have received the following training prior to assignment. The question that I have on this, and I would hope that maybe there could be a mild just enhancing of this section as far as how much or how many hours of each of these items, just so that the community has some idea of what's going on.
Cecile, will you reference the page and section, please?
Sure, it's page 5, section 7.
Thank you.
The other thing on page 9 and section 15, it talks about termination for either side, which obviously this is a clause that needs to be in there. I noticed, however, that this clause is saying that it's immediate. A lot of the contracts, either they give a number of days so that you can have some warning and that type of thing. This one is just like either side can say, we're done. And it's a little odd to me. The other one is on page 11, section 26, on confidential records, because I know for many there is a concern about releasing confidential information, and in the third paragraph, it talks about in the event either party receives a request, whether under the California Public Records Act, a subpoena, or otherwise, for disclosure of educational records. Mm-hmm. And that brought a little concern. I'm not sure that that is in agreement with California law regarding confidentiality of student records. So I just had some concerns there regarding those items, and that I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Nunley.
Good evening. I have some points to make, but I think I know you're aware that there's a coalition of groups that are interested in ending the SRO contract, which is up to be approved tonight. And those groups include Sacramento Act, Brown Issues, Hmong Innovating Politics, and Black Parallel School Board. And the reasons for this is everyone in these groups understand that SROs or police are not the right tool for the goal that I think everyone wants. I think we all want the same thing, which is for the school to be a safe space for students to learn, but there's an existing tool that is a better use of resources. So I don't know what's going to happen tonight if you're going to move forward with the approval, but I hope that even if an SRO contract is approved tonight, that we can dig very deep into reimagining school safety using the correct tool of mental health professionals and other strategies such as restorative justice. I know that they exist at some of the schools, but it needs to be brought to scale. Mm-hmm. We don't need SROs. What we need are people who know how to teach healthy relationships between students and teachers, who know how to teach communication skills, who know how to teach how to have productive conflicts. Conflict is a part of human nature, and there's going to be conflict, and how to resolve it peacefully. And I'm aware of so much research, and this is what I do presentations on this topic, and I'm aware of so many specific examples of schools that take an approach that uses the right tool, and then you don't have the fights and you don't have those kinds of concerns. It works. So if we're going to move forward this year, I hope for 2021, we don't have an SRO contract, but what we have are the tools that we need for real safety.
Thank you.
Stephanie Lopez, Brenda Chagoya, Francesca Lopez, Alma Lopez, and Tracy Cruz.
And can you just state your name? I think you might be going out of order. If you can state your name when you come up. No problem. If you can set the clock, and we want to make sure we get your name for the record.
Oh, Francesca Lopez.
Thank you, Francesca.
May I start?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Francesca Lopez from Luther Burbank High School, here today with the organization Brown Issues to speak on why I'm against the SRO contract. To begin, this is getting really tiring to know that we were here months ago, and now we're here again today, still talking about this when it should be no question that police on campus or surrounding our campuses affect us, the students, in a negative way and make us feel criminalized when walking on the campus. Yet the focus is not on the students, but on making our campuses safe. For whom exactly, may I ask? As I attended a community meeting this past Tuesday, I was left with rage and confusion as I heard a volunteer from McClatchy, and I quote, "There is some undesirable children in that school." Once again, I repeat the words undesirable children, from which she continues stating jokingly that the reason they are undesirable is because of the disruptive ways they carry, as well as them having drug deals on campus. Not one moment did a person stop to think that these children need guidance from a counselor, as they have lived experiences that no child should ever go through. But rather than guiding them, they should be criminalized. If we have volunteers in our district with this mindset, imagine having an armed officer on campus with this mindset, already targeting students because of their disruptive ways. I come from a low-income community full of struggles that volunteers like these ones with this mindset have never even thought of having. Just because teachers feel safe when walking on a campus and seeing an armed officer doesn't mean it has the same effect for us as students. I am Francesca Lopez, a person of color, and I'm not an undesirable child. I urge you to say no to this contract. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Lopez. I'm from Luther Burbank High School, and this is a message from Edith Williams, who wasn't able to come today. So she said, "Enough is enough. You're going to listen now. Our families who come from low income have more problems. In lower communities, we have less support and more SROs. Mental health is high. No bilingual staff for our parents. Our counselors have too many students to get to every single one. Create the space for us to receive the same respect. Respect our wishes for us to respect your work. If not, someone will take over. If your child was profiled and had an altercation to the point where the child was traumatized, you do anything for that child to make sure the child is safe. Listen and understand where we're coming from. So I urge you to vote no on the contract and use the money on mental health counselors. And for my part, I want to thank you for not listening to us. Your lack of leadership is not looking out for us students, which has inspired me to become a school board member and one day the superintendent.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brenda Chagoya, and I'm a senior at CK McClatchy High School. I'm here with the organization of Brown Issues, and I'm also in the Criminal Justice Academy at CK McClatchy High School. And I do not see my two officers as like a person, like people to go as to safety. Instead, I would see someone who actually got pink slipped this year, Mr. Verdine. And he actually taught me, like he had patience with all of us. And I just urge us to vote no in this contract because I feel like we could put this money towards to raise awareness towards vaping, which I see a lot of white students in my school actually trash our campus with vapes and puff pens, which is like dramatically, it's a lot and it's crazy. So I feel like we should invest definitely the money towards that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tracy Cruz. I'm a senior at Luther Burbank High School, and I'm also a member of Brown Issues. Concerning the SROs, I suggest that instead of paying the 3 SROs to roam around our campuses, we should better invest the money towards our students' well-being. I'm not sure if you're aware, but at Luther Burbank, we are split into 4 SLCs, and per SLC, we have 1 counselor. I have that issue that right now, because I'm a senior, I have like a lot to carry on my plate, and I've been wanting to make an appointment with my counselor, yet I'm still not called in for. So it's a lot for 1 counselor to take in so many students, and so therefore I believe that this money should be invested towards the students with concerning the mental health issues. Also, we should invest that money because of what I'm aware, nobody has a nurse. Schools don't have nurses, and I also wanted to address that in this article, it says that we should invest in our students, yet this is our counselor at Luther Burbank, well, was, and his name is Mr. Gray, and he got his pink slip due to the lack of funds at our school. So that is my reason why we should say no to the SROs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, good evening. Alma Lopez, statewide coordinator with Brown Issues. And the growing concern within the surrounding community over the past years regarding police officers at our school has been their undefined role addressing general student discipline and school climate, which has resulted in disproportionate rates of citations and student arrests. However, this data only comes from stories from our students, but no data has been provided by Sac PD nor Sac City Unified School District. It must be clear that the sole responsibility to address and implement school discipline falls on school administrators, not cops, period. Secondly, there is no defined role of when and how resource officers ought to interact with our students, minors, nor a protocol of contacting parents when there is police contact. We have been asking for this over a year and a half. So it's just important to state that this has been a process for like a year and a half that we've been asking in engaging community in the district. Third, given the budget crisis, our district should not be paying for services already rendered by our police department when it comes to serving the community our schools are located in. So we should not be discussing another contract with Sac PD. We should be discussing a true memorandum of understanding that lays the partnership with Sac PD and the district, which really spells out the roles of police officers when and if they are called to our school campuses. 3 cops roaming throughout our entire school district is really not going to do much. In essence, all of our cops already do that in our whole community. So it's more about us spelling out what is their role when they're called to our school campus, but also how are we really working towards the alternative safety plan that we said we were going to work on since like months ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Do we have additional public comment?
Lamaya Coleman, Cha Vang, and Angel Garcia.
Okay. Hi, Lamaya.
Good evening. As you guys know, I'm a member of SAC Act. I have a 6th grader at William Land, and I'm a sub in the district. So I didn't come to the August meeting. I was really happy to see the presentation and to see how some things are spelled out. I was also happy to see in the contract the data collection. There's things that I feel like are still missing in the contract that we asked for, it doesn't, it concerns me that the SROs may attend district trainings, but are not required to attend district trainings prior to having student interaction. So that's one thing that concerns me. And the MOU that sounds really great, but it concerns me that that's happening at a different time frame than the contract presentation tonight, potential approval tonight. So those two things I feel like really should have happened at the same time, so that we knew they're both present. Because if something goes off the rails with the MOU, we don't have it. So I also wanted to uplift. Like some alternative models. Luther Burbank has and I'm not going to get this quite straight, but a restorative justice class with student mentors who, if students get sent to detention, they go to that class, and it's a much more, it's a way for the students to get seen, work things through, and has a lot better outcomes. Also, the student members go into the classroom and can see what's happening in the classroom, which is also an opportunity for administration to then help form and guide teachers, because the teachers and the students both play roles. So I think we really need to be looking more at models like that and spreading models like that, obviously along with wraparound services, restorative justice, PBIS, et cetera.
Thank you, Lamaya.
Good evening, Superintendent Aguilar, Board President Ryan, members of the board. My name is Cha Vang, Director with Hmong Innovating Politics. And HIP continues to stand with our young people, our partners, and our community leaders to demand that the district do not approve of this contract. And I'm going to continue to repeat exactly what we've been saying for the last how many months. Although we really appreciate the district's efforts to assure that there's school safety, and with this recent contract, the accountability around measurements, we strongly believe that cops do not belong in schools, nor should our district use our educational funding to pay for those cops. Majority of our students are still students of color, and many who come from families and communities with historical racial racism that they experience at home. And these communities and these students already are heavily policed and criminalized in their own neighborhoods. We can't continue to do that in the schools. And really, there's so much potential for targeting students of color. And law enforcement also already take over 60% of the city's budget. Why are we using our school funding to pay for them? And we should be really utilizing, as Alma said, MOU to make sure that they are providing the services for safety in our schools. And as I was walking to the boardroom, what I noticed was the social emotional learning piece that you all are so much pride in. And by using school funding to pay for police officers, I don't know if social emotional learning is something that you truly value, because I start questioning it. So I challenge each of you to question whose safety are we really concerned for? And because our students again and again have told us that they don't feel safe. So in closing, I just want to remind you all to vote no on the contract.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Angel Garcia, parent of children in the district. Good evening. I just repeating kind of what everybody says, but there was a Land Park parent that said how the district had gushed about SROs providing school safety and mentoring and things like that. Yet from years of paying police officers for services that they're already supposed to provide by the city, we have no data to show that they've made any real outcomes in social emotional learning, in bullying, in lots of things. And so again, I don't think we should be spending our money on that. The other thing is we have this contract that you guys are intending on voting on, but there's no director of school safety, right, to really spell out what the heck the roles and responsibilities are supposed to be by administrators. As a parent whose 13-year-old was detained by a school resource officer that I was disgusted by his interaction with my son, for loitering. So the administrator called a school resource officer because my son went to meet his friend in front of a school that wasn't his school. So they called the school resource officer because of loitering, and my son was detained. He was put in the back of the car. He was roughhoused, and the officer said, while I was there with his dad, and thank God my son's actual principal called us to show up to say I could make up about 10 different charges on you and take you to juvenile hall right now. I don't want that around my son. Complaints that we're able to make, we're not able to make complaints against police officers. We're able to make them against administrators, and we cannot stop administrators for calling for BS things like loitering. So please do not vote on this contract. If you intend on voting on this contract, at least hire a director of school safety to spell out specifically what those roles and responsibilities are, because it's a free-for-all for administrators. The deed had already been done, and my son's information is now with that officer.
Thank you so much, Ms. Garcia. No more public comments? So we have no more public comments at this time. I think that Superintendent Aguilar was going to speak to the hiring of the school safety director, which I know that each of the board members, per our conversation a couple of months ago, had the opportunity to appoint a community panelist to be part of that hiring process.
Thank you, President Ryan. I do want to just mention that that was a very exhaustive process. I know that we had a community forum in which we heard from many stakeholders about the characteristics that our community was looking for in a new director of school safety. We have gone through that process and we are in the last stage, if you will, for bringing our leading candidate to the district officially, but I do want to recognize Mr. Ray Lozada, who's here and thought that it was important to be part of the presentation and to hear from our community, and I do want to recognize you, Mr. Lozada. If all goes well, we do anticipate having that position filled and here in our district in the next few days.
Excellent. Great. And I want to just appreciate all the community members who took their time to be part of that hiring process based on the community meeting with the community characteristics listed out for the expectation of that hiring. We have a comment from Board Member Pritchett, followed by Board Member Minnick.
Sorry. Thank you, President Ryan. I just want to reiterate, I know there's a lot of talk about the city, and I want to remind everyone that not all of our schools are in the city, and I think you've heard me say that on the dais before. I represent an area that is completely county. And when we call the police, it takes quite some time. We get put in a queue, and it can take up to 30, 45 minutes for someone to get out to our school sites. So I think it goes without saying that the city of Sacramento is in a disarray. That's my opinion. And I think that there's a clear bias on each side. And sure, I definitely think that there's always room for improvement. And that I agree, we need better training for our school sites to deal with these situations. I completely agree with that. And I also agree that we need more counselors. I've seen my own children fail because we don't have counselors. But we've got to find a way to protect you guys while we're doing it as well. So let me just reiterate from the last board meeting that I brought forth some data, and I read through that data over and over again, and from what I read in that data and spoke to law enforcement professionals and read up on the internet, is that SROs on campuses build relationships. It's not just a cop coming to a school that doesn't know our students, and that and I truly feel, I see your guys' shirts. I don't want you guys to think that your voices are not heard on me. They are. But I see that your shirts, the school to prison pipeline. I truly feel in my heart that if we do not have SROs on campus, we're going to see a higher rate of students arrested, because those cops that come on campus do not have the relationships with our students. I have seen it firsthand. I would like to see data on how many incidences that we've had since we haven't had any SROs. And I thought maybe we would have that tonight, but maybe that's something that, do you have that, Nathaniel? Okay, thank you. So this data was clearly, okay, so that I was misunderstanding. This was what, but what I don't get out of this is how is this comparative to what it was prior to us having SROs and having 8 SROs. So, you know, I still don't agree that, you know, having 3 floating SROs is a good choice. But like I said last time, I'm willing to make a compromise and try things out to see how it works. And then also the policy committee that's working on the policy, I think that you guys should probably be, you know, including SAC PD, and I hope some members of the community, I'm assuming you guys come out and you're voicing your opinion. But I do feel that because this is such a need and such a huge discussion in our district right now that affects us all, that it should be a whole board conversation and not just a policy conversation. And I hope that, you know, that my board colleagues, you know, take that to heart. I think, you know, you said you come back for a first read. Well, that gives us, what, 2 weeks to go over a policy? I was hoping that we could all be included in this because it's affecting all of us. I think that we need to get really innovative with SAC PD and figure out ways that we can get you guys into the communities. I know that we lost one of our great SROs that had represented my community for a while to a neighboring district, and now he's working closely with students right in the classroom. And I don't know if we have that in Sac City. I do have some quick questions, and I'm sorry, I will not monopolize time, but I have questions in regards to the actual contract, and you can give me quick answers if you'd like. So on page 4 of 19, there's the data tracking and sharing. It doesn't give me a clear and precise outline of like, so the SROs are going to collect this. Has this been approved by, because I mean, has there been conversations with SAC PD about how that information is going to come through? I thought by prior conversations that it was going to be a collaboration with the administrators and the SROs, and that the administrators would be reporting it back to our district, and then we would bring it to the board. And so I guess I was kind of confused on that whole data tracking thing. And then for the training part on page 5, my question is, how is this different than what you guys have done before? I mean, I know that you guys do training all the time. And in fact, I bet your training is a lot larger than what's on this list. And sorry. I agree with Ms. Nunley about the notice. I think that, you know, on either party, if we just say, put our hands up and say, we're done, we leave ourselves back in that same situation that we were in a while ago when we were having the conversation about if we were going to have SROs or not. And I think that we need to have a notice in place and not just an immediate notice. And then my last question is, I went through these numbers that were presented in the contract of whose schools were broken down. And I was quite surprised to find out that the first SRO would represent 30 schools. The second SRO would represent 39 schools. And then the third SRO would only represent 24. So I guess my main question is, how was that broken out? You know that I've had a great concern about, I'm far east, the farthest east in our district, and the SRO that I would be sharing is with Hiram Johnson. And how, if you guys are, you know, representing 39 schools in my area, and you know, someplace like one of my elementary schools, maybe Abraham Lincoln or Rosemont High School calls for an SRO, how long is it going to take for you guys to get there? And maybe that's a question that you guys can answer, or Nathaniel.
And will you please pause the time? So we have about 12 minutes remaining for the rest of the board.
Yeah, Member Pritchett. I want to take that and work backwards, and then also invite our law enforcement partners to respond as well. I think, first of all, the contract on page 1 also speaks to the potential ability or maybe even the inability for police officers to be able to respond to incidences on campuses because there are 39 sites that one officer is responsible for. So if they're working on an issue at a given site and get a call from another site all the way across their geographical zone, that does pose an potential issue. We don't have non-school site-based SROs within the district right now. We've been relying by and large on Sergeant Brown at the end, and he, I'm sure, has been running all over the district. So we don't really know what response times look like or anything along those lines. That's why we want to come back in 3 months' time just to give an update, because this is all new. We're still redefining and reimagining what this looks like and frankly understanding it. To the training piece, we do have a list of trainings that SROs or resource officers go through, and they are coming up to you. Rao, can you hand this? And I have an extra stack here that we'll make sure is set on the back table.
Okay.
So to the point made about training and the point made in the public comment about how the contract says resource officers may attend trainings, but there's no shall in there. It's because the district is partnering with the police department. They have their own collective bargaining agreement, and that's for their superiors to identify and address. As you can see with this list coming out, they have an extensive list of trainings. Anything you would like to add? Oh, and sorry, one last thing on the data piece. So in the contract, those are the data components that school resource officers will be collecting. And we will also be collecting other data points as necessary once we do have a director of school safety in, because we do work through our administrators as well. And so therefore, if we are requesting additional pieces, we can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we answer all of your questions. And so the data will be provided from the police department directly to the school district. And this is a list of items that were specifically requested. So in the past, what we've done is when we had 8 SROs on the school sites, they'll do daily reports, and those are shared directly with the school, the director of school safety. And so that was broken down, but it wasn't this specific format. So this would be a separate report that is provided with the data requested. The other question I think that you had was regarding the assignment piece of it. So you as the school district are contracting for a police officer, and we understand that fit is really important. We talked about relationships and how important that is for your school site, and so we want you to have the flexibility if someone's not working out or if you need a different fit on campus to request that. And so that's really why that's included in the contract as well. And then as far as training, and I don't know if you want to hear all of this, but Sergeant Brown has an extensive list of all of the training by hours, and you can come up here and read it, or we can provide that to you. But you're right, it is more extensive than what is included in the contract.
You could provide that. That would be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank
Was
you.
I able to answer all of your questions?
My last question was my concern, and maybe Mr. Browning can answer this, of like how these numbers will come up in the breakdown of our district, because I'm very concerned that an area that has a large geographical area, the Far East District, has 39 schools.
Again, the breakdown on numbers of school sites were not based on the number of school sites, but rather the number of calls received in a geographical area. So if you look at this legend on this map in front of you, the call zones 1, 2, and 3. So call zone 1 had 344 calls from January through May 2019. Keep going. Zone 2 had 347. Zone 3 had 350. So we identified based on calls and broke them up into geographical zones based on the number of calls received.
Okay, I think that That's fine. I appreciate that answer, but I think that when we bring this back in February, what I would like to see is the response times as being part of that data, because that was one of my biggest things is like, I appreciate, thinking about how many calls are in each area, but it was really my concern of the response time and how long it's going to take for an officer to get there to a location far east if there's an emergency. So if you could just make sure that's part of the data. Thank you.
Board Member Minnick.
Thanks. I just had a couple questions or comments. First, thank you, Member Pritchett, for your comments. And I appreciated that, you talked about the willingness to compromise. And I know you felt strongly about, having, keeping, the system as it was. My gut feeling is more aligned with what we heard from some of the young people to not have a contract with SROs at all. And I too am compromising, and I feel like this is an opportunity for us to try this and see if it works. And we may find that you're right, or we may find that I'm right. But I feel like this is an opportunity for us to still have the safety net of you all, but without some of the things the concerns that we heard around, just like the feelings that our students have with by having law enforcement stationed on site. A couple things I was going to ask originally about the data tracking piece as well, because I kind of wanted to check in with kind of staff and the superintendent and see how, like, if we felt that list of kind of those data points was sufficient. I know that was a big piece for us. I think whenever that was last October when we first started talking about this, about the data sharing piece. But I'm after hearing some of what we talked about tonight, I'm comfortable with that. And I really appreciated the idea of this information being reviewed in community space. That's and having those community meetings with our new safety director, just because I think that's going to be the opportunity for us to really like own it, and if it's working, great, and if it's not, or we're seeing, things that we need to be concerned about, those are going to be the spaces where all these folks are going to be able to come out and hold us accountable for that. So I appreciate that. I did have kind of the similar question around the training, and I think you clarified it. It sounds like, because my question was, what's the timeline for this list of trainings prior to assignment, like it says, but am I right in what I'm hearing is that these are the trainings that are required by the police department for them to be in this role of SROs. Is that correct? So my question about the timing, it's kind of irrelevant because they're just to be hired on for this particular gig, they have to have completed those. Gotcha.
That is correct, just for the people at home.
Cool, thank you. And then the last question was around Ms. Nunley's question around the confidentiality records. And this might be a question for Mr. Bozio, how this is page 11, section 26. She had asked, I think essentially what she was asking was, how does this affect like FERPA law? And so if you could kind of maybe weigh in, or if there's any reason for concern about student level data on that.
I don't think there is, if I'm understanding correctly, the third paragraph. It's basically saying if the police department were to receive a records request for educational records, that they would then tender that request to the district, and the district would then have 5 days to determine whether it should object or how it should be appropriately handled under FERPA for confidential student records.
So it would essentially, like, if what I'm hearing then, if the police department received that request, it would come to us, and then we would just follow the normal procedure we do.
That's my understanding. That's
okay.
right.
And so sometimes it might be appropriate to share it, and sometimes it might not be, depending on the situation.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Minnick. Board Member Vang.
Thank you, President Ryan. I know we have 8 minutes and 49 seconds, so I'll try to keep this short. Nathaniel, thank you so much for your presentation, and I just want to take this opportunity as well to thank our courageous students for coming out today to speak your truth. I did have some comments and also some questions, but I'll start with my questions first. Currently, right now, we have a supplemental contract, correct, Nathaniel? Can you confirm that?
Correct.
And what is the timeline on the supplemental contract?
I believe the supplemental contract is to get us through on until we have a full contract approved. I also believe that the supplemental contract does also help us bring in other support for after-school enrichment activities and athletics and such like that. So, for example, at recent football games, there are SROs that have been brought in those events as well.
Okay. Is there a timeline, though, on that supplemental contract when that ends?
Is there a timeline on this contract? Yeah, you can. Please.
In the interest of time, I can answer that. It's not a supplemental contract like an MOU that's been signed, but basically the school district has contract with their supplemental employment unit for the sergeant, which is Sergeant Brown, and then from 12 to 5 during school days, and also for athletics. And so it's just really a day-to-day contract at this point.
Okay.
It can be terminated at any time, and if this contract were to be approved, it would supersede.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm also asking this question because I think for me, there are some items that, some red flags. One is, as chair of the policy committee, I know that our committee has been working incredibly hard on the board policy around questioning and apprehension and the roles and responsibility of admin. Right now it is a 11-page document, and I know that the committee and community members have worked incredibly hard. We've taken language from the ACLU. We've also taken language from the Attorney General when they were making recommendation regarding Stockton's police department in their school district. We've also looked at Elk Grove. I think the Black Youth Leadership Project has done some incredible work with Elk Grove Unified, and we're working hard to make sure that we have a comprehensive policy. I think for me, it's also very important to have a policy that actually comes to the board before the actual contract. And I say that because in the roles and regulation admin piece, if I recall, in terms of what we came up with in the policy, is that admin would also be tasked in collecting this data. And I want to make sure that we have alignment, right? And so for me, that's one red flag. The second red flag is also we have not yet hired our safety director, and I want him or her to be able to actually, chime in on the actual contract itself. And so that's the reason why I'm asking about the timeline on supplemental, because if it's not until December, or if we can continue it, I would like to have the safety director on before we vote on this contract. The last piece is, I really want to challenge the board. We talk a lot about reimagining school safety, right? But can we imagine as a board and as a school district, reimagining school safety from the perspective that we don't have to use our educational dollars to fund law enforcement? And I hear Member Pritchett on, it's not just Sac City that's within the school district boundaries. I understand that we have county jurisdiction, but it's also important for us, I think, if we don't vote on the contract, to have strong solid MOU language with our partners. And I think that for me, I feel like that suffice. Recently in an ACLU report, they provided some recommendation on federal, what we should do in terms of when we talk about school safety. They gave some recommendation around what the state should do, and they actually also provided a recommendation for local school district. And one of the top recommendation from ACLU in a recent report is really recommending local jurisdictions to prioritize school-based mental health before actually using those funds for law enforcement, right? We're a school district that talks a lot about data and best practices, yet I think oftentimes we're also making decisions based off of fear or the unknown. And for me, I can't vote on a contract given that I don't have that data in front of me to prove to me that having police officers, even though they're not cited they're not at the school site and they're roaming, our school district. I don't have the data in front of me to say that this improves school climate. And that's concerning to me. And so I encourage my colleagues to really rethink when our students and our parents and our community saying reimagine school safety. Let's reimagine that using those dollars for critical resources that our student needs inside the classroom and in our neighborhood school. So I know that we don't have much time, but that's my position, and I will be taking a no vote on this contract.
Thank you, Board Member Vang. We have about 4 minutes and 30 seconds left for board member comments and questions. If you can pause it. Do we have any response, or was that, I guess it was more of a statement?
So I think the question was around the policy and the timing of the contract. So this contract is only through the end of this school year at this point, June 30, 2020. The policy, we just want to really make sure it gets right. It came back to the policy committee for the first time after a little hiatus with the committee this past month, and we're rolling up again and getting work done. The policy also is going through some changes. So we're continuing to vet it with our admin leadership and community groups and such like that. We just really want to make sure to get this right, because ACLU also says that there are a lot of policies out there that are somewhat similar or try to get to the same intent, but actually don't end up having any kind of like gravity with it. So we want to make sure that we're getting it correct. At the same time, we have witnessed a number of issues and concerns where SROs and resource officers are a needed resource, and I think that there's community members out there or in the audience even that could speak to some of those concerns. So in trying to figure out how to address the pendulum swing from having 8 SRO officers to 0 SRO officers, the board on the 15th decided to rest on the 3. So in order to get the director of student safety in, work on the policy, and bring the contract up to the board, we're working on all these pieces simultaneously, and sometimes we get a little bit more movement in one area than others. So,
thank you, Nathaniel. Board Member Garcia, followed by Board Member Morowski.
Yes, so in the essence of time, I do want to align my comments in my sentiments with Board Member Vang's statement. I am a little troubled by how we sort of procedurally, how we do things, how we make decisions. There's a policy that's still evolving with stakeholder input, and we're voting on a contract for to be implemented, even though there's a supplemental contract that doesn't have an expiration date per se. So there are a lot of, I think, things that are still big questions for me, and procedurally, they're just not moving in a direction where it makes sense to me, where we can have a broader, more comprehensive conversation about what school safety looks like. And for me, a critical component of that conversation is the person that we're about to hire, and that person's not here yet. So I feel that we're making decisions backwards, and that just doesn't just doesn't sit well with me. I did also submitted maybe like 16 questions to staff on the contract. There are some areas that are of great concern to me. The training piece, also the personnel matters, how complaints are submitted and to whom, which complaints are only available for the district to see. The may versus shall of SROs attending community meetings, not only the collection of the data, the type of data that is collected, but the evaluation. Who's doing the evaluation, and what metrics are we going to use to determine whether or not this is an effective strategy that will result in a safer school climate environment? That's been absent, and I still don't see that here. I would hope that this is something that the school safety director will do, but that just simply highlights for me and underscores that we're doing this backwards. And I'm trying to speak as fast as I can because I want to give board member Morawski some time to talk as well. The training piece, the list of training, I understand that you'll have a lot of training coming beforehand, but what if we want additional training? It's not a requirement, it's a may. I'd like to see specific training on de-escalation tactics that is something that needs to happen. So there's just so many questions that, again, I just feel that our process is just not, we're just not doing this in the right order. So, and with that, I will not be supporting this, this contract.
And can you please stop the clock?
Okay, I'll work to address a couple and then invite our partners up as well. So the training piece, it's a may because in the Peace Officers Bill of Rights, they have, around the complaint piece, the complaints aren't outlined and we don't have the ability to look at those complaints because of protections within the CBA with SAC PD. Partners can speak to that a little bit more. So that gets into kind of their HR matters and such like that. The training piece is, again, a may versus shall because we don't have the authority to dictate from that higher level. Now, in the partnership piece and what was passed out earlier, you can see that the training is quite extensive. So some of these mays and shalls just come to the fact that the police officers are not our direct employees, but rather a partnership through this contract. They may attend community meetings because if there's an issue happening at one of our comprehensive high schools and it pops up right before a planned community meeting, that officer has a duty to go to the issue that needs to be addressed at a school site. They have every intention to attend the community meetings that will be upcoming that I mentioned in the presentation, but sometimes it might not happen because of other duties. And anything else you want to add?
Yeah, trying to address your concerns. First of all, in the de-escalation training, all Sacramento police officers received about 40 hours of crisis intervention and de-escalation training, and then SROs receive additional training on how to interact with minors and students and to really understand kind of the thinking that goes into that. As a matter of fact, we brought a grant to the school district a number of years ago called Strategies for Youth, and that was to talk about interactions between youth and police and to try and understand how each party feels in that. In regards to the complaints, there is a government code that does restrict what information can be released, but anyone can make a complaint through several channels with the City of Sacramento because these are City of Sacramento police officers. That's through the Office of Public Safety Accountability or through our Internal Affairs Office. And the law has recently changed under SB 1421 with certain types of internal affairs complaints that can be released. If a complaint doesn't fall into one of those categories, so the complaining party will get a disposition letter explaining what action or that action was taken or the disposition of the complaint. And that is everyone's right who has any interaction with Sacramento police officer. And then on the may versus shall for community meetings, there are times when community meetings are going to be held and maybe you don't necessarily want law enforcement there. It also gives you the right to include or exclude law enforcement. But we have a long history in this district, about 20 years of supporting training and coming to community meetings. And so our intent is if there is a request for us to appear at a meeting, somebody from our office will be there to represent the police department, any concerns. And that is historically what we have been doing. Is there anything else I can answer on as far as concerns?
You have 1 minute.
Okay. Okay. We'll get those to you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, I first want to say a few thank yous. Thank you to SAC PD for working with us on these important pieces and building towards a new model that will work for everyone. I'm happy to see mental health first aid and trauma-informed practices are part of the training. And I hope that's the trauma-informed is also part of the culture as well, not just a couple hours and then done. I want to thank the community members I've spoken with about this issue. Tanya, if you're still out there. You mentioned the community pop-up discussion I had November 5th. I've received over 50 communications, either in person or through a Google form. And I really want to appreciate everyone providing me with their input because it really does inform the way I'm seeing this. I also want to thank staff. I know you've been pulled in a lot of different directions here, so thanks for bearing with us all. So I support the plan to reimagine school safety. It's a different model. We're just not there yet. So I think, to echo Member Garcia's procedural concerns and some of the timing issues, the way I'm seeing this that we're voting on today is this is a 2019-20 contract. This is a placeholder to get us through to where we're actually doing the work through this school year to then really implement the plan next year, honestly, because it's taken a long, long time, longer than I thought. And that's not a hit on anyone. It's just our system, there's a lot of considerations and we can't make our system move faster than it's ready to move. There's just too much to do and there's too few people to do it. So that's kind of how I'm seeing this. So I had one question, and that's to describe how the site administrators can access SROs through this. And then I have a couple of other comments. So in this 2019-20.
Yeah, so I will have the director of school safety is one key way. That position is essentially the liaison between SROs and site administrators, but there's also other contact points and pieces like that. And actually, if I may, I would like to invite Deputy Chief Lester up here because she is intimately aware of both sides of it.
For the interim, Lisa Allen has been filling that position, and she's in direct contact with Sergeant Brown, who's assigned here on a full-time basis daily. So the school site administrator, right now the communication protocol is that the school site administrator will contact Lisa Allen if there's a concern or an issue, if they need some type of law enforcement support. How they're also directed in case of an emergency to utilize the 911 system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so on what issues are administrators able to access SRO support?
Justin, do you want to come and
Is there
speak with some of
limitation on that, or is it up to the discretion? And I'm not suggesting there should be maybe at this point because I just don't think we're ready.
Well, right now, I think the intent is that a school site administrator will contact Lisa Allen or whoever the new Safe Schools director is, and that is sort of a clearinghouse for a request, which is adding in an additional layer of oversight for those requests to make sure that it does fit in with what the district's trying to do. So I can, if I can have Justin speak on maybe some of the requests and some of the issues that he has had over the last few weeks, that would be helpful.
Sure. Sergeant Brown, Justin Brown, the police department. Some of the issues that you guys, administrators, may be able to access law enforcement, obviously the chief mentioned calling Lisa Allen, but you guys would necessarily call a non-emergency number. And we're talking incidents like fights, simple maybe arguments or disturbances that administrators may not be able to handle at the time. What specifically are you looking for?
That's it, just to understand the types of issues that they would be able to call about under this new model.
Fights, calls that involve weapons, disturbances, we may be called out for, to partner with the school mental health resource folks to address mental health issues and provide assessments and make those referrals to medical professionals, a variety of issues, I mean, that we may be called out for.
Okay, thank you. So I have two more quick things. There's some language in the contract that I really think is problematic. And I want to suggest that we strike it. It's under recitals on page 1 of 19. And it says, the district desires to limit our SRO presence on district campuses, and as a result understands that this agreement will limit the ability of the Sacramento Police Department to respond to critical incidents and other emergencies on district properties. So it's very categorical, it's very vague. I don't think it's accurate to what we're trying to accomplish here in terms of identifying appropriate duties for law enforcement versus site. It's not a categorical limitation of SROs on district campuses. There's many, many reasons, and they're, in an appendix of what the other types of things would be. So maybe you can address that.
I think it's also probably a question for the attorney, but our understanding is the district wanted to be very clear in the fact that officers would not be permanently assigned to school campuses, and that that interaction would be limited. And so that's why this clause is included in the contract. So it's very specific, and it goes into the role, really the new role of what's being asked of the SRO.
So I think the first part of that clause is the district desires to limit SRO presence on district campuses. I think that was discussed and decided upon on August 15th, 2019, the last meeting we talked about reimagining school safety. So I think the rest of that is...
I think you're talking about when we talked about non-school site-based SROs, right? Versus the district desires to limit SRO presence on district campuses categorically. It doesn't say the district desires to not have SROs assigned to a particular school and be on campus the whole time. Anyway, I don't think this language is necessary or helpful, and to me...
So you're suggesting an amendment to the current language?
What are our avenues about that? I would be open to striking it if there was agreement to do so.
That could be a motion to do that. Of course, then the city would have to take up that language as well and review that, and that could probably delay their decision on that a bit, I would imagine, since they would have to review a change like that. But it's in the recitals section. I think the intent was that our understanding was that was what the direction was, at least for the first part. And the second part, it may not really be necessary. I think that was something that PD was asking to include, the second clause. So I don't know if they're going to be amenable to accepting that change or not. We did discuss that a bit. In the end, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of difference to, the duties. They kind of are what they are in the agreement. And
Yeah.
it's in the recital. So, but that's up to the board.
Well, I just honestly don't understand why it says that it will limit the SAC PDs, not just the SROs, but SAC PDs generally. Limit SAC PDs' ability to respond to critical incidents and other emergencies on district campuses. I mean, that's not what we're going for here. We're not trying to limit the ability of police to respond to emergencies on district properties. I just don't know why that's in this contract.
Can I ask?
I would welcome any other board discussion on that as well.
Superintendent Aguilar.
Member Morosky, just maybe it's a question for you as well as our partners. Are you seeking greater clarification or clarifying language about the decision of limiting the stationary effect of the old model on campuses as opposed to sort of the roving nature of
It
it.
could be clarifying, or it could, I mean, I don't see any usefulness to having the section in terms of the second part where it says we're limiting the,
So,
what's that?
Board Member Pritchett?
I don't know if I'm going in the direction that you're asking for, but maybe having a sentence after, right before the comma that says something in the matter of, by having non-school site-based SROs. Is that kind of where you're going?
Well, let me ask a procedural question because I don't want to hold up this contract any further. We discussed this in February, then August, then now. Is there any procedural way to move forward with this tonight and actually see if the city and the district could agree on either clarifying language or striking some of that language that I think doesn't belong there?
To be moving forward with the suggestion.
Yeah, I would just say again that, you know, if you don't adopt this contract as is, we can go back and try to further discuss
But it'll
that
set the
term.
timeline back?
That's going to take, of course, a little bit more time. You could adopt it with that amendment, but then again, then the police and the city will have to evaluate that to see if they're still in agreement with it after that change. So I don't know. I can't speculate on how long that process would be, but.
Can you bring a contract amendment back if we vote on this contract tonight? Can you bring a contract amendment back to the board next meeting?
If we vote on this and then bring back the amendment?
Yeah. I mean,
So
Then it would bring it on.
We can bring the amendment back to the table.
Yeah, as we
So the board could move to adopt the contract before you at how you want to. Then we're going to have to take that and go work with our law enforcement partners and the city attorneys. And whatever changes that the board may wish to see may not be amenable to our law enforcement partners. So therefore, we may have to bring something back to present again.
But
for
Nathaniel,
adoption.
please correct me if I'm wrong, because of the board concerns that we continue to adjust and respond to whether or not this is effective or not effective in meeting the needs of our students and our community, we will be doing a quarterly review, including a February addendum, correct?
An addendum, that could be possible. That's not necessarily on the agenda for an addendum. If we need one, that could be a possibility though. But we do intend to come back with updates to the board on reimagining school safety, everything from working with our law enforcement partners to the director of school safety to the data collection pieces and community engagement processes. One thing that we did here is around the response times from Member Pritchett. And so something along those lines, we're going to have to figure out what that looks like and how we track that and who tracks that. But those are all pieces that we can use.
So the safety director position, my understanding is part of the commitment based on the best practices that we had from looking at the Black Youth Leadership Project's work with Elk Grove and others, is that we will have a regular review committee that will look at the data, question the data, and if in fact we are seeing that it is having disproportionate impact on certain student populations or areas, make the appropriate adjustments like they have done in Elk Grove. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So I think what I'm hearing, and I think it's very fair, right? I think that this is not a solution that meets the needs of either side. We are trying to figure out a way to, one, recognize our student voice and student community that has said, and we've heard this pretty consistently, that we do not want cops on campus. This is something that we've heard from a segment, I want to be clear about that, of the student population that feels that there is intimidation and a sense of a school climate that's unwelcoming. So in looking at non-school site resource officers, the intention was to be able to meet the needs of critical incidents safety incidents where we would not want to be in queue with the general police populace, but would instead want to have SROs that have secured the necessary training to be effective in interacting with our youth when they are called, because we do not want non-trained personnel. But I think these concerns around the training being articulated and continuing to understand what the obligation is goes hand in hand with the data. I'm very appreciative of the data that we now are committing to gather, but the reality is this will only be effective if we are in fact working with the same constituencies that are helping to hire our school safety director, so that we're reviewing this and making the commitment to the necessary changes. Whether it's, as Michael Minnick said, one way or the other, we are using this in real time to say, is this meeting the needs of students and our community and our educators at large? And so I think that as we continue to move forward, I am very happy with the work that we've done with the ACLU model policy. And I think that that's probably going to continue to need to evolve too, because I think we even saw from the best practices with the ACLU policy that that needs to be further simplified if in fact it is going to be of relevance and use to our students, our educators, and our community at large. I know that we're over time. Board Member Morowski, you have a final question. I'm sorry I cut you off, but we had already exhausted the clock.
I'm sorry. It is such an important issue. Thank you for allowing that. So I had discussed this with staff prior to our August 15th meeting. Didn't talk about it at the board, but I had originally thought the Reimagining School Safety proposal would include other staff. I feel like what we're lacking here is trusted, trained adults around kids, and especially in those critical, like, after school times. I know, speaking from McClatchy's experience just on Freeport and Cal Middle, and you have administrators who are taking their time and walking down there and being there every day, and and that's just not an appropriate use of our resources either. So I want to know, what can we do? I mean, I don't think 3 is enough, frankly, like, because we don't have other resources in place. Like, we're not there yet to have, a mid-level district personnel that could handle safety. Or so what can we do in the meantime for places like McClatchy, or is it Food Max, or areas where we have just a lot of concerns at certain times after school? I know we have a supplemental contract in place. Is it possible to keep some level of like surge in place for the after school period, which seems to be the most critical piece?
So Member Morowski, I think I heard a couple things in there. First, around training other school site personnel. So in the August 15th meeting, we outlined how the first step to that plan that we outlined to do just that was to hire the director of school safety. So we are luckily almost there from what it sounds like. And we will be circling back around on that, absolutely, as outlined previously. The other piece that I heard you say was around the ongoing concern around some of the larger off-school but directly adjacent to school fights that we've seen, and how we can address that. So depending on how the board takes action this evening, the contract will be in place the week after next, which I believe coincides with the week after the city council takes action. So getting the SROs onboarded and moving will help out considerably. We also do currently have the supplemental contract that helps with the enrichment and athletics after school hotspots and such like that as well.
Will that stay in place, though?
So
Contract that we're passing, yes.
this contract, I think that's...
Well, so what we will do is work with SAC PD, Member Morowski, because as we identify and hire the individuals that, as our partner indicated, have the right fit for our communities, then I would anticipate that part of our efforts will be to make sure that we are meeting the needs on a daily basis, and we are aware of those hotspots. We can come back to you after we discuss with them whether they foresee the need to have a separate set of individuals doing that. I do appreciate, because this is an area where we have heard from our administration, our administrators who are dedicating a lot of time after school in those areas. I think our priority right now is to bring on these officers so that we can begin the process of meeting the needs of our students, at least making sure that we continue to have a safe learning environment. I also think that it's important that we do come back in terms of a more complete reimagined plan. In this case, we're bringing a contract with SACPD because that is a separate part of a larger plan, and we think is foundational to a larger and broader plan as well. So we will have a conversation about whether they foresee a need to have to continue that supplemental contract. We haven't had that conversation, but I do want to make sure that it takes place.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. Sorry, go ahead.
I can address that really quickly. So yes, you can certainly continue the supplemental contract while there's sort of a bigger plan put in place. And just regarding concerns over this contract, there is not a termination or a waiting period. So for some reason, the contract isn't suitable to your needs, it can be terminated anytime. It can also be amended by mutual agreement. So you do have that flexibility with this contract. You know, I absolutely understand, having worked at your school district right upstairs for over a year, the challenges that you're facing. I hear everyone in the audience. I know there's a lot of needs within the school district. And so I think I just want to end by letting you know that we support, you know, what you're, anything we can do to help you with that plan, because just like you know, school safety and student safety is really a priority for us. We understand how important that is moving forward. So I hope that answers some of your questions. We can certainly help with the supplemental plan while you continue to work on the larger plan.
Yeah, I would just ask that, you know, we take a look at continuing the supplemental contract to make sure we have those resources in place, because it now, without all of the plan in place, it's we're just taking away without having enough in place to supplement it. Thank you.
And I do want to ask, just as a final point, for the community members who are here and those concerned on both sides. I mean, we have such limited resources. This is a small amount of money. And one of the things that I had made a request to a couple individuals in the city is, you know, would you be willing to cover the cost of after school hours, et cetera, when we have had additional need for support and it was not favorably met? And so I do think as we continue to recognize that we have a very limited pool of resources, we need to do a better job as a school community in advocating for the city to provide after school hours and weekend supports to our communities for our youth that are absolutely their responsibility as much as they are our responsibility. The one other thing I would say is on the mental health front, I am so appreciative of the comments of Danelle and others. And the reality is we do need social workers. We do need mental health providers in every school site. There are multiple conversations happening right now with the county. One that we know Danelle is very intimately involved in, Member Morawski as well. Another that we've been having, we're looking at a multi-million-dollar investment, right? So, you know, 3 times more than what we would be talking about for this to really be able to provide the kind of supports to have the intervention. And I think that it's absolutely critical that we have you as partners to advocate for those resources because the county dollars for mental health prevention are there. So with that, I'm going to take a motion for a vote.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
No.
We have a preferential vote.
Student preferential vote?
No.
Thank you.
Member Ryan, I have a request.
And Board Member Pritchett, yes?
I just wanted to reiterate my request and ask kindly for the board to pull the committee report that you guys are, or the resolution committee that you guys are putting together and bring it to a board learning session. That way we can all work on it together.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, thank you. It's late. Board policy.
Item 10.0, the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Do we have a second? Student preferential vote.
Yes, on the open session items.
All those in favor? Aye. Item 11.0, business and financial information reports. Receive reports, 11.1, enrollment and attendance report for month 1, ending in September 20th. Are we receiving those reports? Okay. I guess so. Do we have any public comment on that? I know Cecile often does. Okay.
We sure do.
You could not forget about me, right? So obviously, this is the first month, and it says that it is ending September 20th, and so we're getting it November. So it appears the second month should have ended probably around October 20th, so I'm hopeful that we will be getting...
I'm sorry. If I can ask everyone to move their conversations outside, we're unable to hear our community members' public comment on our suspension reports. Thank you.
It's not suspension yet. We don't have those reports yet. This is attendance.
On our attendance report, thank you.
Yes, attendance report.
Here.
And obviously, the rates don't look that bad just yet because it's the first month. But I also am anticipating that we should be getting month 2 pretty quickly. The other thing is, obviously, I am looking forward to seeing the suspension reports. And then I'm wondering, and I'd like to make a request, if we could possibly start seeing chronic absentee reports for each of the school sites. I think that would be something that a lot of the parents, from what I have heard at a number of the meetings, they would appreciate hearing that.
I think
So,
that's an excellent idea and certainly consistent with our Be Here campaign. Wonderful. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Nunley. Item 12.0, future board members and locations and meetings and location dates. We will be meeting next on November 21st, 4:30 p.m. closed session, 6 p.m. open session. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Oh, we still have to go back into closed session. We are going to adjourn back into closed session.